do Casey.
In their hands for public. We'll miss her tonight, but I'm sure she'll be back, and I'm sure. Order, and if we can have the flag raised or garnished across our screen here, so we can go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
to the republic
and the
for which
republic
it
for which
stands,
it stands,
one nation,
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and
justice for all.
I'm starting to get nervous because I mute everybody that I'm saying it wrong, and I'm like, no, I've got it. I can't wait for the day, because otherwise, like this cacophony of sound, I can't wait for the day that I can point to somebody in the audience again and have them take it over for me. Moving on, we will have a roll call.
Yes. Vice Mayor Agrimonti.
Here.
Councilmember Barnett.
Here.
Councilmember Ding.
Yeah.
Mayor Harvey.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, a note that Councilmember Harrington is not with us, though she wishes she could be. There's just a personal emergency that she had to address. So we'll be moving on. So we're going to go ahead and just overview of the public comment process for meetings like this. Sometimes we have new people attending, and so it's always important to go over it. Just to note that we are participating online, so everybody is in their own homes or home offices or whatever. I'm noticing how much lighter it is today in my house, thanks to the daylight savings time, which is nice, though I hope we can get rid of that whole structure that we do in the future. Anyway, so people are allowed to turn off their cameras if they'd like to, because you may have a roommate or a child or somebody else who lives with you, dogs, cats, what have you, that jump into the screen, and you may need to deal with that. So we're allowing anybody, staff or city council members, to turn off their camera as long as they're not leaving the room. If you're in the audience tonight waiting to public comment for the council, we cannot see you and we can't hear you until we bring you in to make a public comment. And the way that process will work is you'll raise your hand, and Mary McDevitt has got it nailed right now in the participants. You'll raise it virtually by hitting that raise hand button, or if you're calling in, dial *9. We'll call you into the meeting. You'll be acknowledged, and we'll go ahead and let you speak. There was an issue last time about timing and people being able to see a clock. Is there a way that we could do it so they can see how much time they have left? Because we are limiting them to 3 minutes.
I will look into that. Maybe Latanya look to see if she can do something to reply. For me to display from my screen, it makes it very difficult, Mayor Harvey, because I'm running the meeting. So it's difficult for me to go back and forth.
Okay.
But maybe Latanya and I can work together and get something in place. I'm not sure if we'll get it for this first.
I've seen ones where I think they just find a clock online, like a stopwatch, and they just do a share screen, and then people can see it. But either way, you'll have 3 minutes to make a public comment, and we'll try to give you a minute warning. So if you get interrupted during your public comment, we're not being rude. We're just trying to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. Also, you can comment. We'll have a public comment session for items that are not on the agenda. Otherwise, wait until your item comes up for public comment. And additionally, you can make a written public comment to publiccomment@sonomacity.org. And Latanya will read it out loud for you. Great. Moving on. We have no report on closed session, so if we have a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve.
Moved by Madeline.
I second.
All right, Vice Mayor Agrimonti moves. Councilmember Ding seconds. Do we have a motion, or do we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Vice Mayor Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett.
Aye.
Councilmember Ding.
Aye.
Mayor Harvey,
Yes. Great.
thank you. The motion carries 401.
Awesome. Beloved unanimous vote. Moving on to comments from the public. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matter presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the mayor, that's me, begin by stating your name. And so I see a number of people who have got their hands up. So we'll start with Mary McDevitt. Mary, you're on with the Sonoma City Council.
Yes, thank you. My name is Mary McDevitt. I'm a retired physician living in Creekside and a member of Physicians for a National Health Program. And I would like to thank Mayor Harvey and the members of the council for your support of the resolution for a single-payer healthcare system for the state of California. Also, I'd like to offer a special thanks to Mayor Harvey and Council Member Ding for their support of the California Nurses Association's car caravan that took place on February 6th. As you're probably aware, AB 1400, the California Guaranteed Healthcare for All Act, was introduced on February 19th by Assemblyperson Ash Kalra and had 17 co-sponsors, one of which was our Senator Mike McGuire. As you do your work going forward, I would like you to keep in mind the $700,000 that you presently spend yearly to provide healthcare for city employees, and what other things you could do with those dollars if California had a single payer system. And finally, I want to leave you with a story. It's always good to tell a story of a different type of surprise hospital bill. This involved a construction inspector, a union member, good insurance through Blue Cross, who had to have an elective knee replacement. He checked to see that his hospital, which was Mills Peninsula, was in network, and was very surprised when he got the hospital bill that stated that he owed $27,000. How could this be? Well, it turned out that his union and insurance company had used a technique called reference pricing, which I'd never heard of before, whereby they could put a cap on their responsibility for this procedure at $34,000. And as a result, the patient was responsible for the balance. The goal of this process was to get their enrollees to choose a less expensive hospital for this selective procedure.
1 minute.
I encourage you to read the New York Times article that I submitted, which shows the wide variation in hospital charges for the same procedure based on your insurance carrier. The article was especially pertinent because it related to the Sutter healthcare system, which we have here in Northern California. The analogy would be if you went to buy a new car and the price you paid was determined by the type of credit card you had, there would be one price for Visa, different price for American Express, yet a different price for MasterCard, and so on. That is the system that we have now in our hospitals for charging. Again, thank you for your support for single payer healthcare for California. I hope we can make this happen.
Thank you so much, Mary. And next we'll go to Gil.
Gil Latimer, Grant Court, Sonoma. Good evening, Mayor Harvey, Vice Mayor Agrimonti, Sonoma City Council members and staff. I'm here once again representing the Sonoma Valley Cannabis Group, and we would like to thank you all for continuing to move the second dispensary issue forward. No doubt there are many out there wondering, why do we need a second dispensary? Well, that's a great question, and there are a number of answers we can offer to help folks understand why this is essential. So, for those out there listening tonight, first, let's set the table a little bit. When it comes to medical use, our patient community needs access to the widest choice of cannabis products possible to manage their serious and chronic symptoms. Unfortunately, inventories at dispensaries can range widely from shop to shop. It's just the nature of the market right now. They don't all carry the same products or brands, and their availability can even differ from one visit to the next. let's also consider that a product's medical efficacy can be unique to the individual. So now, if you're used to purchasing a particular product at your local dispensary that you know works really well for your insomnia or your arthritis or the pain in your newly reconstructed knee or your chemotherapy side effects, and then you go back next week and find that the dispensary no longer carries it for whatever reasons, what do? Well, then it's back into the car again for that long round trip drive to Cotati or Santa Rosa to find what you need. Or you can pay an extra fee to have it delivered to you from those other locations. But let's remember that our fastest growing demographic for medical cannabis is seniors. And many of these folks don't necessarily have a lot of money or easy access to transportation. I know you've heard that before, but these are really important considerations. A second local dispensary could make an important difference for people. Why would any of us wish to keep those at risk
30 seconds.
scrambling for what they need? That doesn't really seem fair, does it? We think folks deserve better. Can we say this out loud? It really comes down to caring and kindness. And with that, best wishes to the council and have a good evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill, for getting into the weeds of our cannabis needs. We'll move on to Rebecca. Did you have a point?
No, I'm just going to try something. So bear with me for 1 second. I think I found a timer that we can use. So I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, perfect.
But we'll see how this goes. Okay. There we
Perfect.
go. I
Great.
just can't do anything else while I'm sharing. So
That's okay. So if we could go ahead and bring, it looks like Milton in, or no, Dave Ransom. That's the hand that I see up next. Dave Ransom.
Milton's already in.
Oh, Milton's already in? Great.
Yes.
So go ahead, Milton. You're on with the Sonoma City Council.
Hearing me clearly?
Not clearly today.
All right. Hang on a second.
Oh, it's
We're
Rick
claiming-
Silver. That's fun.
No. Disguise as Milton, always.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, greetings and salutations, members of the City Council, staff, and those contracted to serve the city, such as the city attorney. Tonight I come to you on the 2065th anniversary of Et tu, Brute, the killing of Julius Caesar by Brutus in 44 BC. Now, tonight's topic will be a continuation of my main theme from prior evenings, money. Following upon Gil's gentle nudge to expedite the second dispensary, I would like to amplify that by saying, would the city council be interested in between $240,000 and $400,000 in additional annual revenue from the taxes imposed on sales of cannabis? Would the city be interested to know, as was put forward by the HDL consultant, that for every dollar spent at a small independent cannabis dispensary, the customer spends $3 in and around the environs, be it at a bookstore, at a restaurant, at a bar, etc. Once again, these bring considerable revenues to the city coffers, a much needed addition, given that the Sheriff of Nottingham is on vacation and during COVID unable to go out and collect additional taxes. Following on to the initial speaker, Mary, who mentioned that there could be considerable savings to the city by implementing and supporting a single payer insurance system, having additional revenues from this one additional dispensary would be considerable. Am I down to a minute? Yes.
Yeah.
That's really all on my agenda this evening. I appreciate your ears. They will remain intact, and I look forward to future adventures with the City Council. All seriousness aside, though, I do hope that you will accelerate the second dispensary and any and other projects that benefit the residents whom you serve, be they housing, be they insurance, be they increasing ways to bring new revenue.
Okay, that was an abrupt cutoff, but thank you, Richard Silver. Yeah, I think that's right. Moving on, we got Dave Ransom.
Hi, my name is Dave Ransom. I live in Santa Rosa. I go to church in Sonoma. Most of my friends live in the city or in the Springs. The San Jose Mercury reports that 100,000 Northern Californians working in the hotel and restaurant industry have lost their jobs due to layoffs during the pandemic. That surely has impacted folks whose jobs were in Sonoma. We can hope that our social relief efforts, the food distributions, fish and undocu funds, rent relief, along with unemployment checks and stimulus handouts, have enabled most of them to survive. We can also hope that they will be back at work soon, those who have not left for greener pastures. But there is little awareness that locally that one of our largest layoffs in the industry happened right here in Sonoma. 124 of our friends and neighbors, most of them low-wage workers, let go by the lodge. The lodge's layoff was apparently the third largest among hotels in Northern California, after Auberge du Soleil in Napa and the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay. As you may know, the lodge is owned by Marriott, the world's largest hotel chain. Until I looked into it, I wasn't aware that many other hotel brands are actually part of Marriott. Ritz-Carlton, St. Regis, Bulgari, Sheraton, Westin, Courtyard, Fairfield, AC, Renaissance, the list goes on. Marriott owns 15 hotels in wine country and is building 4 more. Do we gain enough from allowing Marriott and other chains to squat in our towns? Do they bring more money into the community than they take out? Or are they just profiting off our blood, sweat, and tears? I learned about Marriott's layoffs at the tail end of a story in the Press Democrat. There was more coverage in the San Jose Mercury, but I haven't seen anything in the Sonoma Valley Press. It would be nice to know what has happened to our fellows, those 124 workers. Could the city somehow keep track of its workforce? Most likely, they took their troubles home with them to Vallejo and Points East, to the Springs and Points West. Marriott's stock has doubled in the last 5 years, and instead of supporting our people through hard times, it is mounting a 33% expansion worldwide, about which you can draw your own conclusions. Thank you very much. I'm done.
All right, thank you. Seeing no one else rise, I'll go ahead and bring it back to the council and close public comment. All right. So we were supposed to have a presentation, item 3.1. Oh, do we have any meeting dedications?
None from me.
I have one.
All right, we'll go Councilmember Ding and then we'll go Councilmember Barnett.
Our neighbor, Richard Casali, and passed away February the 26th. And he has been in our town for decades and providing his free dental service for the Hannah Boys students for decades. And also he has been the board member for Hannah Boys board for the decades. And also, I was co-leader with him in the Sonoma Valley Citizen Advisory Commission. So it is really, really the loss for our community. And I will send my biggest respect and the best wishes to him. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Ting. Councilmember Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to dedicate this meeting to Dick Peters. Dick Peters was a member of the North of the Mission neighborhood, and he passed away in January at the age of 91. His obituary in the Index Tribune began, "The world is a little dimmer with the passing of Richard Carr Peters." And I believe that's a perfect line because Dick was a talented architect, a creative lighting consultant, and a cherished professor at Berkeley School of Architecture. Dick Peters was part of an era of architects who helped shape the built fabric of the Bay Area, and the richness of his life was best reflected in his home on First Street East. Dick and his partner Don transformed a concrete block house by a Mare Island machinist into a delightful museum of collectibles. Dick was a gentleman who cared about Sonoma. He did not seek limelight or pursue political office, but his contribution was executed in a quiet manner. It was very influential, especially in recent years with the North of the Mission Neighborhood Association. As I said, Dick was 91 and he leaves behind a younger brother and 2 nephews. And just last month, he was interred with his life partner, Don, at Mountain Cemetery. Dick will be missed, and I also want to thank Chair Willander of the Planning Commission for helping me with this memory. He was a longtime friend of Dick Peters as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmembers Barnett and Ding. Really fitting tributes to important members of our community, and I appreciate you for doing that. We're moving on to item 3.1, just a presentation. Am I on the right meeting? Yeah. Presentation by Sonoma Water regarding fiscal year 2021 to 2022 draft water transmission system budget. City Manager, take it.
Yeah, I think we might want to move up Fergie to do the introduction.
Yeah.
Doing that now.
Thanks.
And Lynn Roselli.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. I will share my screen and the presentation.
And while Lynn's sharing her screen, this is Colleen Ferguson, Public Works Director for City of Sonoma. Happy to introduce Lynn Roselli from Sonoma Water, also called Sonoma County Water Agency. A team of water contractor staff, including City of Sonoma, have worked closely with Lynn on preparation of the water transmission system budget for next fiscal year. As you know, Sonoma gets most of our water from way over yonder under the Russian River, piped through aqueducts down Sonoma Valley. And it's just crucial that that water keep flowing. And so Lynn has worked on this budget that she is presenting to the council tonight. It will go to the Water Advisory Committee for a vote. Councilmember Ding, be ready for that at the next WAC meeting. And we're here just to learn about it at our council meeting tonight. Take it away, Lynn.
Hey, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Lynn Roselli, Administrative Services Division Manager with Sonoma Water. I've been with Sonoma Water for about 12 years now. And I will be presenting a draft proposed budget and rates for the water transmission system for fiscal year 21-22, which begins July 1st and runs through June 30th. I'm assuming you guys can see my slides. Is that right? Yes, good. Okay, excellent. So for those of you that are not that familiar with Sonoma Water's enterprises, they include water supply, water transmission, flood protection, wastewater treatment and reuse, and energy and sustainability. For the purposes of this presentation today, we are only talking about water transmission, and I just want to let you know that The revenues that we receive for water transmission may not be used in any other enterprise. They are only to be used for the intended purpose. And so we do not commingle or transfer funds among these different enterprises. So this is kind of a 10,000 foot level map of the water transmission system. In the upper left-hand corner are the Mirabel Roller production facilities on the Russian River. And there are three main aqueducts, the Santa Rosa Aqueduct, the Sonoma Aqueduct, and the Petaluma Aqueduct. And we develop budgets and rates for each one of the aqueducts, and the water contractors on each one of the aqueducts pays for the rate and budget on that particular aqueduct. So I just wanted to go through the process really quickly. Colleen mentioned this a little bit, but we engaged in a transparent and collaborative process. The rates and budget are governed by the Restructured Agreement for Water Supply that is signed by the 8 water contractors and Sonoma Water. It was signed in 2006. That forms the basis of this budget and rates. On March 1st, the Technical Advisory Committee voted on, well, we first developed the budget. We presented it to the Technical Advisory Committee Budget Subcommittee in January, and we met with them and had discussions in January and February. We took their input and made revisions to the budget. The Technical Advisory Committee voted on March 1st to recommend the budget and rates to the Water Advisory Committee. And then we're making presentations to city and town councils and water district boards in March so that you understand better what the budget and rates are, what's in it, and can ask any questions that you might have. And then on April 5th, the Water Advisory Committee will vote on the budget and the rates. And it will be adopted by Sonoma Water's Board of Directors on April 20th, and that is required by the restructured agreement that we have it approved in April. So I'm going to go through a little bit of where the budget is, where we budget funds, operations and maintenance. And then there's 4 separate sub-funds. There are 5 capital funds, and there's a series of debt service funds, a state revolving loan fund, and some revenue bonds. In the sub-funds, the Water Management Fund is primarily for the Urban Water Management Plan, which is being submitted this fiscal year. The Watershed Planning and Restoration Fund is primarily for compliance with the biological opinion. It's the National Marine Fisheries Service 2008 biological opinion that requires certain mitigation activities. It's a 15-year plan and is due to wrap up in 23, but I hear that there's a phase 2 biological opinion being discussed at this moment. So these are the funds that we budget for. And I'm going to start with the capital funds and the capital projects. These are the hazard mitigation funds and the status of those projects. On the Sonoma Aqueduct, you would be responsible for your share of the Mark West Creek Crossing project and the Russian River Crossing. Those are both seismic hazard mitigation projects. We're also in the preliminary design phase for the Sonoma Aqueduct crossing of Spring Creek and Bennett Valley, the Bennett Valley Fault. Again, seismic hazard mitigation. We're trying to get as much design done as we can so that we can be most competitive when we apply for grant funding. We will apply for FEMA grant funds to help offset some of the costs. So the overall budget for fiscal year 21-22 for hazard mitigation projects is $5.4 million. And other capital projects that the customers on the Sonoma Aqueduct would be responsible for include the Sonoma Booster Pump Station Upgrade Project, which is beginning to wind down right now. We're reaching substantial completion. There may be a little bit of cleanup work or administrative work to do early next fiscal year. And then there's the Mirabel Dam bladder replacement project and the Warm Springs Dam hydroturbine retrofit. All of these will be active in next fiscal year. And so when we add these capital projects with the hazard mitigation projects, we end up with a budget, a capital budget of $9.7 million. And then on to operations and maintenance, we have a cathodic protection project on the Santa Rosa Aqueduct and Russian River Cotati intertie. We have various well pump sets and valve replacements, and we are embarking on a tank maintenance program to maintain all of our 18 storage tanks in the system. And then we also are involved in a number of, proceeding with a number of studies. One is the Regional Water Supply Resiliency Study that's led by Jay Jaspers, our chief engineer. And it is a collaborative process. It involves all of the water contractors. So you are all providing input to that study on an ongoing basis. So the budget for operations and maintenance is 30.5 million. And I mentioned the biological opinion compliance. One of the projects, which is probably the most costly project, but much less costly than the alternative, is the Dry Creek Habitat Enhancement Project. Water contractors are responsible for funding phases 4, 5, and 6, or miles 4, 5, and 6. We are collaborating with the Army Corps. The Army Corps is paying for 65% of the costs, and the water contractor share is 35%. So that is a huge help in offsetting some of the costs of the water contractors. The Corps is anticipating that they will begin construction on phase 4 in fiscal year 21-22. We are still working on the designs of phases 4, 5, and 6, and those will go to construction following phase 4. And then another budget item is the subfund for water conservation. And that is particularly of importance because we're in the third driest year on record. And with a drought conditions facing us, it's extremely important to make sure we message water conservation and make sure that we support the water contractors in their programs. There are also a couple of grant programs that the water conservation team has that allows funding of water use efficiency projects. And we do pass through funds to the water contractors that are participating. And so when we combine the budgets for Dry Creek Habitat Enhancement and water conservation, we end up with a budget of 11.05 million. So when we compare this fiscal year 21-22 budget to this fiscal year's budget, you can see that the total down the bottom, there's about a $3 million difference. And that $3 million difference is largely on the capital projects line item. You can see there that there's almost a $3 million difference there. So we made a concerted effort to reduce the budget because of COVID, because we heard from the water contractors, and we are aware that the community is really suffering from the financial and economic hardships of the COVID pandemic. So we made every effort we could to reduce the budget as much as we could. You can see at the bottom there that we're using 8.49 million in use of fund balance and bond proceeds and grants. When you take the net budget, you subtract that $59 million total, 16 million from the 59 million, you get 43 million. And for fiscal year 21-22, when you subtract the 8.5 million from the 56 million, you get 47 million. So that difference, the 43 million for this fiscal year and the 47 million for next fiscal year net budget, is what makes up the rate increase. So this is just a visual pie chart to give you an example of, or show you where the money is spent. It is largely spent on operations and maintenance. 54% of the budget goes to operations and maintenance, 17% to capital projects. The biological opinion and water conservation make up 20%. Debt service on bonds and loans is 9%. And then we have the 8.5 million in offsetting revenue that helps reduce the rate increase and the rate. So now that we've talked about the budget, we're going to talk about the rate setting process. This is governed by the Restructured Agreement for Water Supply, and it tells us that we must use the lower of the last 3-year annual average water deliveries, or the last 12 months of actual water deliveries. And so when we do the math here, you can see that the 3-year annual average is the lower of the two. And when you finish doing the math, you can see that you get to your cost per acre foot. This is an example of $1,000 per acre foot. And it is a fully volumetric rate. It is a uniform rate. So when deliveries decrease, the rate goes up. And when deliveries increase, the rate goes down. And in a drought year, we have seen deliveries as low as 40,000 or 42,000, maybe 44,000 acre feet. So if we come in lower if the actual deliveries come in lower than the budgeted deliveries, we have to use more fund balance to fund the projects and that have been budgeted for that particular fiscal year. And we'll be keeping track of that during the course of the year and start making cutbacks if we're seeing that we're well below budgeted deliveries. In comparison to some other water wholesalers, Sonoma Water's rate is on the left there at $1,000 per acre foot. Zone 7 and San Francisco Public Utilities elected not to raise rates this year. Santa Clara Valley Water District is proposing a 6.7% rate increase. And San Francisco Public Utilities, I believe, indicated that they would be proposing a 9.8% rate increase. Contra Costa County has a 3.75% rate increase. So there's a variety of different rate increases for other wholesalers. We just wanted to give you an example to show you how we compare with other wholesalers in the Bay Area. And so here is the proposed rates for fiscal year 21-22. On the Sonoma Aqueduct, your total rate is $1,145.18 with a rate increase of 3.43%. You pay a little bit more for bond and loan charges because of the Eldridge Madrone pipeline project and for financing the Sonoma Booster Pump Station project. So you're a little bit higher on that end, and the Sonoma water contractors, the water contractors on the Sonoma Aqueduct under discretionary charges there, which is about 3/4 of the way down on the page on the left side there, elected to have a aqueduct capital charge rate that is a rate that the water contractors provide input to. They chose to set it at $38 per acre foot. And it's the reasoning being is that there are a number of hazard mitigation projects coming up on the Sonoma Aqueduct. And because you have such a small customer base, it's important to maintain the fund balance in that fund as much as possible to help soften the impact when we actually get to construction, and we're going to look for FEMA funding as well and other sources of funding to help offset any costs. But this will help certainly not only build fund balance for future capital projects, but it also serves as a rate stabilization tool to avoid rate spikes in future years. And I just wanted to go over some budget and rate reduction measures that we implemented in light of the COVID pandemic. We've reduced the rate increase from an initial rate increase of 6.56% down to 4.1%. And then the water contractors provided input on the aqueduct capital charge. And so Sonoma Aqueduct ended up at a rate increase of 3.43%. We were able to save about $1.3 million in the budget by decreasing capital project costs, deferring some capital projects, increasing our use of fund balance, reducing the water management subfund rate to 0. That's the one for the urban water management plan, and just funding the residual costs in 21-22 with fund balance, and decreasing some of the labor costs in water conservation. That wasn't a significant amount, but we were able to shave off some money there. And in general, just as it's not an exact science, but the rate increase on average is approximately 65 cents per household per month when our rate is passed through to customers. And we know that, when people can't pay their rent and their utilities, it's very difficult to pay even a 65-cent per month increase. However, the rescue bill is passed, and we're hoping that going forward, there will be some help on the way for our community to help offset, the financial impacts that they've incurred over the past year. And next steps are, I will continue to do presentations during the month of March. The Water Advisory Committee votes on April 5th, and our board will adopt it on April 20th. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments you have.
Thanks, Lynn, for that very comprehensive presentation in terms of putting that in context for City of Sonoma. So we will be going into our budget process. The largest item in our water utility budget versus purchasing water from Sonoma Water. So this sets the rates for the largest item in our water utility budget. And we will need to come back to council to refresh or adopt 2 more years of water rates for the city. And we're talking about that at staff, and it'll be coming forward to council before the budget's adopted here in Sonoma.
So this is Madeline. I do have a question for Lynn.
Of course.
Lynn, I wanted to ask a question. It's 65%, 65
6.5.
Are you
per
talking?
household. What, I don't get that part.
An
65 cents.
increase of 65 cents
Cents.
in the
Cents per
water bill per month per household.
Okay, so 65%.
No, 65 cents. 65 cents.
For what? Thousands of gallons? 200 gallon? What does that mean?
It means for an average family of four and whatever the per capita household use of water, I think I think we assume something like 4,000 gallons per month.
Okay. And could I ask a question? Now that everybody's home, how does that affect you, your agency?
We're not seeing an impact on the water deliveries at the moment. I think that the dry conditions have caused people to use a little bit more water, and we're not seeing the impact yet. But as the drought progresses, or if it does progress, we're expecting that if the conservation message gets out there, that deliveries will decrease. And as deliveries decrease, that puts pressure on the revenues that we receive and the budget that we're able to expend. But we're not seeing a significant impact on the wholesale water deliveries right at this moment.
Thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Councilmember Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor. This is my first water presentation, so forgive me if this question is stupid. But in the calculus of determining how much to increase the rate, you use capital projects. Is that correct?
Well, we use, in determining the rate, what goes into the rate is the operations and maintenance costs, the cost for all the subfunds, the cost for the capital projects.
Right, so the capital projects, you use that cost and then you pass it on to the ratepayer, correct?
For any of the line items, the cost gets passed on to the water contractors who pass it on to the ratepayers.
So I guess my question is, in the future, when you said that the city of Sonoma will have to pay for its fair share of the upgrades and the aqueduct, et cetera, has that already been established through the increase rate based on our ratepayers, or will the city also have to pay out of our water fund to pay for the upgrades on the aqueduct, et cetera? Does that make
any upgrades on the Sonoma aqueduct will be paid for by the city of Sonoma and Valley of the Moon Water District.
But didn't you use the increase in the upgrades on the aqueduct? Aren't you passing that on to the ratepayers?
Well, we don't pass on to ratepayers, and Colleen, maybe you want to help me out here, but we just charge you, and we just gave you an example of about how much it would cost ratepayers going forward based on this rate increase. But you would have to do your own calculation based on how you pass through our rates to your customers.
To the wholesaler, right? Correct. So then, I guess my question would be for Colleen: are we budgeting these improvements, the aqueduct, et cetera? Do we know those are coming? Is that sort of in our capital improvement plan, water fund?
That's a great question, Councilmember Barnett. So the city maintains our water distribution system. So we budget for capital projects to drill a new well, to replace aging water pipelines so we can keep delivering safe and reliable water to the community. So we budget capital funds to do work on our system. Sonoma Water budgets capital funds to do work on their system, which includes the Sonoma Aqueduct, bringing the water from way over yonder all the way down to Valley of the Moon Water District and City of Sonoma. The part of the system that all the water contractors use, we all chip into. Part of the system only serves Valley of the Moon, Sonoma Valley, So we have a separate capital reserve fund in Sonoma Water's finances to pay for Sonoma Valley's part of the major aqueduct system. So our capital funds for that are part of this whole budget discussion that Lynn just went over. You won't see it in the city's capital improvement program because that's for our part, our infrastructure. But our water rate, that's part of our overall water budget, pays for our share of the capital projects that Sonoma Water does. Does that make sense?
I think so.
As Lynn mentioned, there's just not that many customers here in Valley of the Moon. So we end up having to pay more per customer essentially into the water infrastructure because it's a long ways to get water to not too many people.
And when we share, I assume we're sharing those improvements with Valley of the Moon. And
Yes.
is that percentage or based on number of customers? Is that how the division is?
Both Valley of the Moon and the city of Sonoma pay the same dollars per 1,000 gallons to Sonoma Water for the water they deliver to us.
Okay.
That's based on how much water we deliver to Valley of the Moon versus City of Sonoma.
So when we're talking about rate increases, we're talking about increases to the rate that Sonoma Water charges our city. And then after that, we have capital improvement projects, which may also increase the rate that an individual ratepayer would pay.
Yes.
And we'll absorb that by charging a higher rate to the ratepayer, I assume.
Right. And and you're new to the whole water rate discussion. We previously did a water rate study, brought water rates to the council that were based on as much as 6% increase annually in the rate for buying water from Sonoma Water. So this rate increase that's proposed for next fiscal year would be within what we anticipated in the Sonoma Water rate setting exercise.
That answers my questions. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And just for your information, at the end of next fiscal year, depending on how much water is delivered to the Sonoma Aqueduct, you'll have about $450,000 in fund balance in your Aqueduct Capital Fund.
Councilmember Ding, any questions?
I have a question. Do you have education program for your budget? And for example, from time to time, send the users and the flyers or in the seminars or, work with the school, with the students, how to wisely use the water, where the water come from. That is general education.
Yes, we have a very robust water education program. We reach a lot of students throughout Sonoma County, and it's ongoing. And we've actually had to transition, like so many teachers did. Our water conservation team and water education team had to transition to virtual teaching and had to, revamp the program to be virtual because so much of it was actually done in the classroom. So we go to the classrooms and teach in the classrooms. We also take the students out to the water facilities. The students do calendars and drawings of how to conserve water. It's very involved. We do water, we do energy education. So it's very thorough.
That's great. Thank you.
I just posted in the chat a link to the water education page at Sonoma Water. It's a very impressive program. I've been working in this county for 30 years and I've always been really impressed with Sonoma Water's education programs. And part of what we do pay for in our rates are these water education programs.
That's right.
What kind of percentage you are using each year?
I think
Very small amount.
So the water conservation budget is approximately 2.5 million, but that involves water use efficiency programs and water education combined. So that's 2.5 million out of a $56 million budget. So
Okay.
yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jack. Or thank you, Councilmember Ding. So it looked like you had anticipated a 6% plus rate increase in 2020, chopped that down to 4.1%, and now we're looking at, in this fiscal year, we're looking at a 3+% increase. Is that, and then are we anticipating year over year that we're going to see these kinds of increases? Is it kind of like every year it's like a 3-4% creep?
Yep. Every year, it's probably a 4 to 6%. At what we've told the water contractors historically and what our long-range financial planning tells us is that we need to have rate increases of 4 to 6% to accomplish our long-range financial plan and operate and maintain the system and comply with the biological opinion requirements, et cetera, et cetera. We've been on kind of the lower side of 5%, I think 5.3% maybe this year, but lower in a number of years. So we do respond to situations where there were wildfires. We've reduced our rates. With COVID, we've reduced our rates. But yes, there will be ongoing rate increases. For cost of inflation, I mean, if in normal years, not COVID years, inflation is as much as 3% in Sonoma County. So 3% plus 1 or 2% for capital projects gets us to about a 5% average rate increase per year.
Okay. Yeah, not insignificant over time, but I understand it's a part of the broader context. And then the other question I'd like to ask is regarding water delivery. Sometimes we get questions around, and I don't know if you're the right person. I assume you know this, but and this is maybe not the right context. But we get a lot of questions around increased population in the city of Sonoma, more housing, and things like that, and whether or not Sonoma we would have the infrastructure to deliver that kind of water. From a Sonoma water perspective, is there a cap that we're near in Sonoma County, or for delivery specifically to the city of Sonoma?
So we're delivering about 46,000 acre feet per year. We have water rights in behind Lake Sonoma, the dam, of 75,000 acre feet. So we're nowhere near close to that amount. We don't want to get too close to that amount because that means that we have to build more pipelines and aqueducts, bigger aqueducts to get the water to you, which would be much more expensive. But we're not near the population growth that would warrant that. And if you have population growth, that will certainly help begin to, close that gap of not having, the economy of scale problem that you have now where you have so few customers, so that it's difficult to pay. Did you want to say something, Colleen?
Yeah, Mayor Harvey, for the city of Sonoma specifically, we're also well below our contracted volume of water that Sonoma Water is contracted to deliver to us.
Great. So it looks like from a county perspective, you could almost double, and then you would hit that number, and then Sonoma as well. Okay, great. Yeah, I was just curious about that. And then it's interesting that we do, this education, of course, water conservation is important and good, and especially in drought years, we need to do it. But it's interesting that the metrics work out to where it's actually costing more. But it's what you would expect because you're buying less of a product, and now it becomes, the costs stay high and increase over time. So it's the way that works. So conserve water, but it might cost a couple extra pennies.
But I guess one of the things is that we really do try to keep that in the 4 to 6%, whether we're in a drought and have really low deliveries or whether we're, delivering a lot more water. So if we're in a drought, our rate increase might be closer to 6%, but in years where we deliver a lot more, it might be closer to 3 or 4% in general terms.
Right. And we have a tiered system, right, based on income in Sonoma? Oh, I remember during the water system rate, it was like we had 3 different tiers, or not based on income, based on amount of water usage. That's okay. That's
right. We do have that. We have 3 tiers.
Okay, cool. Any other questions for our presenter here? Well, thank you so much, Ms. Roselli. Good, I apologize. And of course, the illustrious Colleen Ferguson for your time today. We really appreciate the presentation and all of your work to make sure that our water is safe, secure, and delivered to the city. A lot of hard work goes into this. It's a thing that we're lucky enough in this country and in this city to open our taps and be able to drink water right from it. And so it's a blessing and it's a miracle that takes a lot of people and a lot of hours to achieve. But it's all kind of under the ground work that nobody sees. So thank you so much for doing that. And I appreciate you coming here to tell us about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to the consent calendar. So all items listed upon the consent calendar, or do we have public comment on this? Do we do a public comment on the presentation? Do we need to? Jeff saying no. All right.
No.
So moving on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar considered to be routine will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, the council may change the order of the agenda. Does anybody wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. And I see Mr. Fred Albach raising his hand.
Sorry, I was typing in the chat. I was just upset I couldn't comment on the last item. I didn't intend to do anything with the consent calendar, but I had some great comments and questions, but missed the boat on that. So sorry.
I apologize, Fred. If you write us an email, I'm sure we can get some answers for you.
Okay. Well, I would never mind.
All right. Moving right along. Oh, we do need to do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Moved by Councilmember Agrimonti, second, or Vice Mayor Agrimonti, I apologize. And seconded by Councilmember Barnett. Do we have a roll call vote?
Vice Mayor Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
All right. So we're moving on to item 5.1, and unfortunately I got a note from our city manager that this may not be occurring today. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dave Kiff.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and council members. We had a little mix up in providing our good city attorney with the correct version of the ordinance. And so therefore I'd like to continue this to April 5th so that we can have the right review from the city attorney's office on the ordinance.
All right. So we got an idea here. Do we have comments from council, because we got to take public comment on the motion to move it? Okay, I'll go ahead and go ahead, Councilmember Barnett.
Would it still be appropriate to discuss parts of this ordinance? For example, if we were going to consider modifying it, would it be good to discuss that now? So those modifications are part of the April 5th discussion, or should we just wait until April 5th?
I certainly don't mind if you discuss it and provide some input. If we're taking public comment anyway, what it would happen is, again, it would be reintroduced on April 5th.
Yeah, but if we had simple changes, we could reintroduce it with those changes, and that might expedite the process. Okay. Did you have an idea in mind or something you'd like to add to this, Councilmember Barnett?
I do, although I'd like to hear public comment first.
Okay, well, you'll hold us in suspense. Any other questions or thoughts from council before we? All right, I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. And I see Mark from the Sonoma Chamber of Commerce with his hand up.
Good evening, Mayor Harvey and members of council. Mark Bodenhammer, representing the Sonoma Valley Chamber of Commerce. Our organization want to make it clear we have not taken an official position on this, so just sharing some anecdotal input that I've received from a couple restaurant and other food-related businesses. I think by and large, these products are being phased out on their own, with or without an ordinance from the city. With that said, these, as I've shared with a couple council members and a bunch of people in our business community, these are not friendly products. I think we would all like to see them go. The only thing I would just suggest at this point, or I guess passing along the feedback from other people, is asking for some time with regard to implementation. There's a few of these products that don't have alternatives yet that are economical and easy to access. I'd say 90% of the products that were used, 20 years ago before we started paying attention, those products have a suitable alternative. But there's a few, like some warm meal containers, soup containers, some wine shipping products, some of those things. So I guess just wanted to share the idea of potentially phasing this in slowly, giving a little bit more time. Certainly right now, as restaurants are putting so much emphasis on their to-go food, and we're going to need to continue doing that as we ease into a more relaxed economy. So just want to ask for additional time, whether that's with implementation or with an official penalty phase or something like that, because businesses have quite a bit going on. So just sharing my 2 cents there. Again, full support for getting rid of these products here in Sonoma and everywhere else, but time is the key consideration. Thank you for listening to me, and support your decision, whatever you choose.
Unmute yourself, Mr. Mayor.
I apologize. Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate that. So do we have anybody else raising their hand? I'm seeing none. So we'll go ahead and bring this back to council for discussion and close the public comment section. Councilmember Barnett, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah.
Rebecca, if you could stop the screen share, I'd appreciate it.
I guess my first question would be for either Dave or Jeff. I know the County of Sonoma is going to consider this ordinance at some point this summer. And would that apply to the entire county or just the unincorporated areas?
Just the unincorporated areas, unless it's adopted as an urgency or emergency measure. I doubt that it will be adopted as an emergency measure. So it would apply only to the unincorporated areas.
Okay. Again, I sort of agree with what Mark Bodenhammer from the Chamber of Commerce just said. I think I think the science is very clear that these products are not good, and the recommendation from the Climate Action Committee and CSEC is a good one, obviously with Zero Waste Sonoma. And so I'm more than happy to support this ordinance. I just, instead of going into effect 30 days after passage, I think we should be perhaps a little more flexible on that, perhaps maybe a year after passage, so we could pass it now. And the only thing I would add is if the county does pass this before the year is up, and that applies to the unincorporated area, in a perfect world, I would like the city and the unincorporated area of the valley to always have the same sort of regulations on business. And so if there's a way we could add that to the ordinance, maybe give them a year, unless, so the unincorporated and city policies are always sort of the same. That was just my idea.
Comments from other members of council?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I know on zero waste, we're discussing this, and within this provision, it says, I can't count I don't know how many paragraphs down it is, but because it's sort of jumbled in with other things. So the paragraph starts at one issue of concern from city staff. And in the paragraph, it says this provision would authorize the city manager to grant a 1-year exemption, but only for specific recycled and composted products that are no longer recycled or composted due to such external events as global market conditions, closing of a recycling or composting facility, or a public health emergency. So the other one still, of course, and Mr. Mayor, and I don't even know how to say it, but PFAS, is that what it is? That's something that they consider to be forever chemicals. So those are the things that I understand are very, very important. So I just wanted to mention that. But I agree with Council Member Barnett. And of course, it doesn't matter because our city manager is saying we're going to continue it. But so thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Agrimonti. Appreciate it. Councilmember Ding.
I agree that we be a certain time to be prepared, and then cap it out.
Yeah, I would concur with that as well. I think it would be good to give these businesses a little time. People have been making a lot of adjustments over the past year, and certainly we do need to ban styrofoam and PFAS and the rest of it from usage. Nobody's lunch should last for 1,000 years. Of course, in this ordinance, we're looking at plastic being allowed, which is sort of recycled. It's recycled if it's cleaned off, but how much of this is truly clean? The right direction to go long term is to try to develop a reusable solution like they have in Oregon and other places where they have these kind of companies that do that. But I think for right now, we're going to push to the next meeting, it looks like. And I think you've gotten a couple comments here that there's a desire from council to give a bit more time, potentially a year, for these businesses to adjust to this ordinance and not have it come into effect directly 30 days after it is passed. So I think, do we have a motion to continue to which date is it? Jeff Walters wagging his finger at me.
I have a question for the council. We heard from the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce that he thought that there were specific products that if those could be, the ban could be phased in over time, that would be of assistance to the local restaurateurs in particular. Some of the wineries are using some of the styrofoam for packaging and mailing. Is it any desire in the council to identify those products that would then not be banned immediately, or is it just simpler to put it off for a year and leave it at that?
Well, I don't know that the request was specifically around packing material. If we had specific targets, we could start a ban on certain ones and then go beyond. But I know there are a couple of restaurants in Sonoma that are using styrofoam right now, as well as wineries using styrofoam for shipping wine. The question, especially around those wineries, is where are they shipping out of? And I think the majority of those shipping facilities are in the county. For a lot of them, or they use a third-party shipper. So they're ordered here, but then the shipper is sometimes in Napa, sometimes in other regions. So I don't know how much it would apply specifically with regards to wine shipping, though I don't think we should allow styrofoam in wine shipping either. We should try to get rid of it as a material tool in general.
Mr. Mayor, my thought would be this, that we could come back when this is returned to the council.
Yeah.
We could, after consulting with the ED for the Chamber of Commerce, we might have a list of 6 or 7 different products that he has found by talking with other businesses that they would like not to have banned, perhaps not even within a year. And we would have that as an option for the council to choose, that those would not be banned, perhaps for a year or 2 or 3. That would be one approach. The other approach would just be, as Councilman Barnett was suggesting, putting off the effectiveness of the entire ordinance for 1 year. Then at the end of 1 year, all the items that might be covered would then be banned at that time, irrespective of whether they would be on the list that the executive director might come up with.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could I interject, Mr. Mayor? I know zero waste. I believe this ordinance has been presented to all the cities. It's been a while we've discussed this. So I would like to know what the general culture is with respect to this. I know we have a right to be different, but if it's something that they want support from other cities, I would just like to know what that might be. So waiting a year is probably an issue for me.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I do think it's better for us to be in line with everybody else. And I think also the purpose of doing these ordinances is to do some amount of push for businesses to mode shift into those other products and get away from products that are continuously harmful to the environment. I mean, we know that styrofoam exists in landfills for thousands of years after it's being used. And so I think that would be my desire, to try to get rid of those in the city of Sonoma as quickly as possible. I think that's a desire of a large number of our community. So I would certainly be interested in seeing a list of products that businesses are concerned about, but I don't know that I would be on approval. I think kind of giving a year to prepare, to give businesses to identify products that might work, might not work, and give them time to kind of adjust and know what's coming, to exhaust the supplies that they have in one way or another, would kind of be where it is. But these externalities of doing business come back to bite you at some point, and so that's kind of where I sit with it.
And Mr. Mayor, we may know more by the 5th.
Yeah, constantly changing. And I do agree again with Councilmember Agrimonti and Barnett that being in line with the county and the other cities in the county is the ideal spot, so that businesses can share and do group purchases or or however else that share notes and information, however else they would get around and figure out responses to these changes. Councilmember, comments?
Yeah, I think that is correct. Give you, half year or 1 year being prepared, because these kind of suppliers usually buyer and make an order large quantity, and then good price. And then if they suddenly stop the order, it's not good for the supplier. And also maybe our local business owner will got the penalties, or that isn't, I really don't want to see that.
Certainly. Great. I think we've got solid direction here from the council. Do we have a motion to continue the item till, what's the date? The 5th? What's the date?
April 5th.
April 5th?
April 5th.
Yeah.
Somebody want to move that? I'll move that we continue this item to April 5th. Do we have a second? Okay, good. Yes, there we go. Good. Can we get a roll call vote?
Yes. Vice Mayor Agrimonti. She's still muted.
Muted.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett.
Aye.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 401. And can I just clarify who the second was? Was that Councilmember Barnett?
It wasn't.
Great, thank you.
He's new, so he's trying to pad his stats as much as he possibly can. The rookie card's going to look pretty good by the end of the year, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to item regular calendar. And, so far I would note that we've got 3 straight unanimous votes so far tonight. So pretty good. We'll move on to item 6.1, update on fiscal year 2021 budget to actuals discussion, consideration and possible action on mid-year budget amendments to the City of Sonoma's operating budget and capital budgets for fiscal year 2021. Interim City Manager David Kiff and Assistant City Manager Sue Casey, who knows the budget like nobody's business.
So yeah, I'm going to hand this over to Sue, and then both Sue and I would welcome any of your questions at the conclusion of this.
Good evening, Mayor Harvey and council members. Tonight, I'll be going over the fiscal year 2021 mid-year budget to actuals and mid-year budget adjustments. So the final budgets for fiscal year 2021 were adopted on June 29th, 2020. And as we're all very keenly aware, last fiscal year on March 12th, 2020, the City Council issued a proclamation of a local emergency in response to the global health crisis and pandemic brought on by COVID-19. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting response to slow the spread of the disease has greatly impacted business and tourism activities in the city. Last fiscal year.
Pause here real quick. Was there a presentation or is it just? Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, you're just talking. Okay, good.
I was going to throw up put up the mid-year budget to actuals, but I'll bring them up in just a second.
There was another meeting where Christina was here and we didn't have her pictures up and okay, good. So okay, good. I still wanted to have it again. Great, you're doing great, Sue.
Sorry, no.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last fiscal year, fiscal year 1920 began with a balanced budget, but steep drops in hotel and sales taxes for the fourth quarter led to an estimated revenue shortfall of more than $2 million. In May 2020, the City Council approved a plan to reduce expenditures by cutting spending wherever possible and deferring one-time projects. And although it was originally forecast the city would need to use $1.2 million of reserves last fiscal year, projected actuals, and these are unaudited for fiscal year 1920, indicate the city will need to use only $500,000 of reserves. The general fund revenues most impacted by the pandemic are TOT and sales taxes. And last fiscal year through January 2020, TOT revenues were on track to reach $4.8 million. Then the pandemic and shutdown occurred. So the fiscal year 2021 budget included TOT revenue of less than half that amount, down about $2.6 million. Sales taxes, with restaurants comprising the largest single segment, are also highly impacted by tourism. Total sales taxes for fiscal year 2021 were projected at more than $1 million below 1920 levels. So projected declines in these and other revenues were forecasted to be partially offset by revenue sources with less short-term volatility, such as property taxes. However, the fiscal year 2021 budget projected $3.3 million decrease in total general fund revenue, with $20 million from $20.5 million in fiscal year 1920 to $17.2 million in fiscal year 2021. So to meet the challenge of balancing the budget for fiscal year 2021, a combination of spending reductions and a drawdown of reserves was used. As a result of fiscal prudence, the city has developed a healthy financial reserve. After using a projected $500,000 of reserves in fiscal year 1920, general fund reserves at the beginning of fiscal year 2021 are estimated to be $8.97 million. So at this point, the full financial impact of the most recent related shutdown, stay-at-home order, which began on December 3rd and ended on January 25th, is unknown. Although Sonoma County moved to the less restrictive red tier this past weekend, hooray, it is hard to forecast the full outcome of the most recent closure until we have actual revenue figures for both February and March 2021. However, based on what we know now and with forecasts from the city's sales tax financial consultants, year-end projections indicate the city will be on track with the original conservatively estimated budgeted revenue for fiscal year 2021. And I'm going to throw up the, I'm going to put up the, so here's the fiscal year budget to actuals. And so I'm just going to go over a couple of the larger revenues and expenditures for fiscal year 2021, our forecast to fiscal year end. So the adopted budget for fiscal year 2021 projected revenue of $17.2 million. And some of the larger revenue sources, property taxes were budgeted at $4.5 million, and they're expected to come in as budgeted. We have our first payment is received in December, and a second one comes in April with a cleanup payment in June. Sales taxes, regular sales tax was forecast to be at $2.7 million, and they're paid 2 months in arrears, and we're forecasting about $2.78 million through year end. So it's forecast to come in about as budgeted. And then the measure V sales tax is actually estimated to come in $100,000 more than budgeted, and that's with a recent forecast and update from our HDL, our sales tax consultant. TOT is paid through January 2021, and with the recent shutdown, we're reducing the forecast to year-end by $371,000, and that's based on what we know through January 2021, where we're at about 51% of what we had forecast. So we're going to reduce that budget by $371,000. And then the only other one I was going to mention is the EMS revenue. That's our EMS revenue. Sorry. There it is. We had originally forecast at $1,980,000, and we're going to up the forecast by about $600,000. Although ambulance calls for service have been down, with a restructured fee schedule and up-to-date billing practices. Plus, we're using a new outside billing company called Whitman Enterprises, and they're an expert in the EMS billing revenue billing field. It's making up for the lower call volume and bringing in quite a bit more revenue than budgeted. So we will be upping that revenue source. So so with that, our original revenue was forecast at 17.2 million, and we're adjusting it upwards to 17.7 million. Expenditures, I'm not going to go through each line item except for I am going to mention that salaries and benefits are down, and that's because we have several vacant positions that haven't been filled this year and will probably not be filled until year end. And that's one of our major expenditures, our salary and benefits. So we originally forecast total expense to be 19.3 million, and we're now forecasting it to be 19 million. So at the beginning of the fiscal year, when we originally did our budget, we thought we would use $2.1 million of reserves. It looks like we'll be using about 1.3 million in reserves. So staff is recommending several budget amendments that are included in attachment B and in the resolution. And we looked at all the other funds as well, and there's two other budget adjustments in the other funds, which total $40,655. So this past year has been an extraordinary and unprecedented time. The impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic on the city's tourism-based economy linger. However, there seems to be some light at the end of the tunnel as vaccinations are increasing and new case numbers are falling. Sonoma County has moved into the less restrictive red tier, which among other things will allow limited indoor dining. And last week, the federal relief package was approved, and this will provide approximately about 2 million, which will help to backfill some of the city's lost revenue. Using experts such as HDL to assist with sales tax forecasting and relying on tourism industry experts for related surveys and data has assisted the city with forecasting in the unknown. Staff is reviewing and revising the city's 5-year long-range forecast with actuals and new information. We continue to closely monitor the city's finances, and we'll use all of these resources as we work on developing the fiscal year 2021-22 budget. So staff is recommending the adoption of the attached resolution to amend fiscal year 2021 budget resolution 40-2020 to accomplish fiscal year 2021 mid-year budget adjustments. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Mayor, this is Madeline. I have a question. Sue, thank you so much. You know, actually the narrative in the beginning, I guess I understand that better than, you know, the spreadsheets. So it was excellent. It really, you know, made a lot of sense to me. I just wanted to ask a question about EMS. So EMS revenue, does that go to the district and then we get a share, or I don't understand the system.
No, it actually all comes to the city. When the district actually, you know, we split it off as a JPA. Part of the agreement was that the city would keep the ambulance revenues, ambulance billing revenue, and that in part has to do with the 201 rights. The city holds the 201 rights for ambulance service, and so that's why the revenues all come to the city.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Ding, any questions?
My following question is as to EMS expenditure, what's the reason increased by $88,000?
That's for the new billing company, Whitman Enterprises.
Okay.
And they charge 4% of actual collections for their services, which is extremely low compared to the increase in revenue that we're seeing by using that company.
Is that a so-called surcharge or? different, if any, original contract, did we mention that? Or because if this is the first year, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe we can negotiate with them because we never got this unexpected expenses based on our original contract.
Right. Well, and the EMS or the contract with Whitman was approved by the fire district after the budget had been approved. But again, with the increase in EMS revenue, their billing practices, I actually worked with them at another agency as well, and they really are experts in the field. So you can see by the increase in revenues that they are doing a great job, that there is a fee for service there. So, and 4% of actual collections is pretty low.
All right. How about another one is the operation expenses increased by $85,000. That is the operation.
Councilmember Ding, you'll remember we had a recent settlement that required the city to pay for legal fees associated with that settlement, and that's exactly this amount.
Okay. Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Councilmember Barnett, any questions?
No.
Great. None from me either. We'll go ahead and bring it out to the public for comment. We've got Fred Albach. Rebecca, nice job on figuring out that clock with that.
Okay, here I go with my 3 minutes. Good evening, everybody. I have a question. I was at a Springs MAC meeting when the county treasurer was there and Mark Ramford of LAFCO, and they were talking about what kind of money the Springs had to possibly incorporate. And so they demonstrated that the Springs does not have enough money to incorporate unless it would just be incorporating right around the big hotel there. So, but Mark Ramford also mentioned at that time that if Sonoma was unincorporated now, that he would not, as LAFCO, recommend that Sonoma be able to incorporate because it didn't make enough money. So just listening to this presentation here caused me to wonder if in the city manager and assistant city manager's estimation, does Sonoma have enough money to run, or was that an inaccurate statement by Mark about how much money the city makes? And if the city does indeed, in normal times, have enough revenue to function as a city, and the city would possibly annex the Springs in a hypothetical situation, would the city have enough money to cover part of that? You know, just sort of like West Germany would cover the cost of annexing East Germany. I'm just curious, you know, about what that would look like. And so, first question is, does the city really have enough money to run? Is the city okay? And two, is there enough cushion there to cover part of some annexation so that the city actually has some extra wealth from the revenues that it has? That's my general question.
All right, thank you, Mr. Albach. Anybody else rising for public comment? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close it. It's always interesting when we do budget adjustments because the general comment oftentimes with city naysayers and government naysayers in general is always about budget and finances, and then we have these public meetings and nobody ever shows up for them. So I would just think that that's a little comical. So we did have a question from a member of the public about city finances, and I was at that meeting of the Springs MAC as well, and one of the points was that the city wouldn't be able to, it would be very difficult for us to make it without our sales tax measure, our Measure B funds that we just passed, which we thank the voters for, and our TOT. And that's what Mark was, I think, was saying, was without these specific revenue measures, that the city has passed, it would be difficult for the city to operate as an incorporated place. But I guess the questions there were, is the city financially the city financially secure? And secondly, could the city absorb the springs, which I think is maybe a bigger question, but we'll see what answers we get. Go ahead. I've got Dave Storr with 2 hands up, one virtual and one real, but also virtual. So I'm going to go ahead and let him go first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't a participant in that meeting, but I can tell you one of the first things they do, assuming let's play the game of we're not a city at the moment. One of the first things they'll do is they'll look at the fiscal ability of the city to actually sustain itself, and they'll enter into what's called a tax sharing agreement, which basically could cut the revenues by half. So I'm not quite sure what Mark was talking about there, but one thing that he reported to the commission just this past meeting about a week or so ago is that he's going to conduct an MSR, which is a municipal services review, which is where LAFCO will do an independent study for us, the last one being completed in 2006, where questions that Fred has asked will be addressed without getting into the deeper question of the springs. That's really a hypothetical at this point, but this report that Mark will commission with his funding will take about 4 to 6 months and talk about the fiscal viability of the city, our operations, our infrastructure capacity with respect to sewer, water, and other things. So maybe a little bit premature to get into that what if scenario, but that study is coming. That concludes my comments, Mr. Mayor.
And I saw our city manager, Dave Kiff, also wanting to take a stab at this one.
So the city is fiscally secure. No doubt about that. Again, as the mayor mentioned, the TOT helps, the half-cent sales tax increase helps, but you guys have been able to squirrel away a good level of reserves that helped us through this pandemic, knock on wood. We're towards the end of it here. The federal stimulus money helps as well to kind of replenish our reserves. If indeed that's what you decide to do with it, that will come back to you at a future date, not too far into the future. But what that does is it really resets the city's fiscal situation again, post-pandemic, in a good place, so that you can look at additional capital improvements and you can look at other one-time related things that would allow us to kind of, take up where we left off. So, I think this is a good news report, and the city of Sonoma will continue to see good news ahead again, assuming the pandemic is at its end point.
And of course, we wouldn't be in such a good financial situation if it weren't for the efforts of Susan Casey. So if you have any additional comments to make on Fred's question, I'd welcome you the chance to do so as well.
Well, as Dave said, the city does have, really good financial reserves, and that's an important thing. There's many cities that don't or went through their reserves during this pandemic. So we were very fortunate, because of the fiscal prudence the city has used and in the past to have these kinds of reserves. And even though, TOT and sales tax are our greatest revenue source, even with the, really steep decline in those revenue sources, we were able to absorb it. And then, coming down the road here with the fiscal, the package from the federal government with a little bit over $2 million, we're going to be able to either replenish our reserves or, whatever the council, wants to do with those funds. But putting it back in reserves will put us back in a really good position for that. And I would not say that you can't say that we wouldn't have TOT, because that's, for the city, that's been, we've had TOT, that's one of the city's largest revenue sources, but we are a tourism-based economy. And so TOT has been there in the past and will continue in the future.
So, and Mr. Mayor, this is Madeline. I can't remember how long ago, but it was a huge issue for us to actually sit down and talk about the reserves. It had always been sort of floating around, and here's what we've got. But I think that the last council was pretty clear about that, and we really learned a lot from Sue and of course Kathy. But prior to that, it was, you know, it wasn't an issue. But I think it's important, especially now that we've gone through this.
Absolutely. I think in response to the question from the public, we've got a resounding, the city is in a good financial place, and we're secure, we've got good reserves. But on the question of annexing the Springs, which I think in many ways makes sense from a community standpoint, and then certainly from equity and other standpoints, it would have to take significant more study to know that, to look at all those things. And the report from David Rampett would say no, but I think there's certainly, you know, always study that could be done around that issue if that is something that was desired to be done by our citizenry and the people who live in the Springs as well. But there are definitely people who support that. And I think that that's a great idea. And I think, you know, growing up here, you view that as part of the city. I think I was quite shocked to learn that that isn't part of Sonoma, right? That there's a line of delineation between the two.
Right.
And there's advantages and disadvantages to all those things, but there we are. So I'll welcome any comments from council on the presentation that we just heard on our mid-year budget adjustments. So any comments from, I see Councilmember Barnett with a finger in the air.
Yeah, just briefly, I just want to thank Sue for all her hard work on this. I want to thank previous councils for their fiscal prudence, as we discussed, when it comes to our reserves. And I also want to thank the council of June 2020. I remember when we were discussing this budget, or when the previous council was discussing this budget right after COVID had struck, there were optimistic based scenarios, there were conservative, there were pessimistic scenarios. And I just want to thank that previous council, of which Mayor Harvey and Vice Mayor Agrimonti were decision makers, for selecting what seems to be the right scenario as we're sort of coming in real close to that. And so obviously, as Sue said, this has been a very unique year, but it seems like we have weathered it well, and hopefully the light is at the end of the tunnel. I just want to thank everybody for their hard work. This is the whole ballgame, the budget, obviously. So thank you.
Councilmember Ding.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much, Sue and Dave. That is really, really hard to project, especially, you know, we just open it up. You know, nobody knows in the future. But one thing is very clear. Each quarter after pandemic, we lost $400 to $500,000 for each quarter. So last the fiscal year, we using reserve fund, 470 something. But these 3 quarters, we need to use another 1.3, and hopefully we'll put together, you know, we already lost the 2 million, less than the 2 million, roughly 2 million. So that basically, you know, city is bleeding. Unfortunately, we got the, you know, accumulated fund. We have the $8.8 million sitting over there. That is out in the previous, out in the city council and the city staff accumulated for more than 10 years. So my question is, sooner or later, and $1.9 trillion, and right now in the signed by president, we can get our fair share, you know, around the $2 million. This $2 million exactly can fill the gap out in the loss. So also I concerned about some of our account, long-term account, for example, an affordable housing trust fund. We use it up because we spend this kind of money for the rent assistance. So I'm thinking about in the long term, if it's possible, when we got reimbursed from the federal government, I pretty much for sure and will be and $2.something million, and then we can pay back, replenishing these kind of money back to our affordable housing, because affordable housing trust fund is our long-term strategy. This is just kind of an emergency and use. Right now, it's the time, if we got the money, it's the time we can pay back. And in this way, we can healthy in the short term and also in the long term, and so-called sustainable. You know, that is my, again, and thank you, thank you so much. It's hard to project it because those numbers, you really, really hard to access 2 months delay, we got a sales tax from the county, from the state. Yeah. Overall, it's good. Good report. Yeah. Thank you.
Councilmember Ding. Vice Mayor Agrimonti.
Oh, I have nothing. I just want to move to approve.
Okay, great. Well, I also want to thank Sue for all of her hard work on this. It's a very well laid out budget. I think it's logical. It makes a lot of sense. And I do remember, the previous year working with Madeline and Councilmember Harrington and Councilmember Hundley as well on this budgetary process. And it's amazing that we've been able to get through this year and be in the situation that we're in. And so it really speaks to good decisions by staff and the leadership there, and also the leadership of the council. So happy to be where we are, which is in not such a bad shape for a global pandemic and a national recession. And looking forward, very, very happy to see the passage of the COVID relief bill with zero Republican support, which was sad. But this is a nonpartisan seat, but it's worth mentioning. But also, I think it's really, really critical for not only for us, but also for our citizens. I hope, Sue, that you're incorrect on the TOT and that we see a higher number come in. But I think it's good to be conservative, and I think it sets us up for a better future. And I agree with the comments made by Councilmember Ding that as this federal relief money comes in, we should look at backfilling the reserves and ensuring that that's shored up, but also look at our Affordable Housing Trust Fund and replenishing those funds that we used for good purpose. The reason we use those funds, just so public is aware, is to help with rental assistance, not just for citizens of Sonoma, but for the entire valley. People who work and live in Sonoma Valley, the Springs included. We see them as our neighbors and an important piece of our economy and our community, indeed. And so reach across that invisible line to make sure that those folks were taken care of as well. But I would like to see that replenished. The other piece, and I spoke with the city manager about this earlier today, we've got a number of businesses who've had to, struggle through this pandemic, and we did spend $100,000 in assistance to there. I'd also like to see us consider any fees that were paid to the city to get permitting for parklets or get permitting for overhangs or any sort of adjustments to combat the pandemic and stay open. I would love to see a conversation around paying that money back, not for the construction of the parklets, but specifically for the fees that they incurred with the city to get allowance to build those. And I don't think it'll be a significant amount of money, but I think it'll mean a lot to those businesses to get some of that back. So that's a discussion for a later date, but just in the context of the overall budget, those are some of the things that I'd like to see us talk about there. Any other comments from members of council?
No. So as we move on, Mr. Mayor, may I move to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma to amend fiscal year 2020-21 budget resolution 40-2020 to accomplish fiscal year 2020/21 mid-year budget amendments.
I second.
The second's always the easy part, and we'll call for a roll call vote. Rebecca, you are muted.
I am muted.
One day we'll be able to just talk without pressing a button first.
I thought I had muted myself. Vice Chair Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett.
Aye.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 401.
And thanks again to Sue Casey for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Sue.
To all of our other managers at the city for getting their projections to Sue, and to Jenna Burrows, I'm sure, who put in a lot of work in there too. So it's just like the water fund, a lot of really, really important work gets done and nobody sees it happen, and we just reap the benefits. So thank you so much, Sue, for everything that you did here.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Moving right along. Oh, this one's mine. Okay, cool. So discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding various housing-related issues to bring back to the future council meeting. Item 6.2. I guess I can keep this for a little bit, or should I turn it over to you, Dave?
No, I want to fall on my sword first.
Okay, well then go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. So this item was requested by Mayor Harvey involving housing, and I did have a conversation aligned with that one of the best places to discuss this is within your quarterly agenda planning document. And since I've been here, we haven't done one, and we're just coming up to the end of the quarter, so I need to do one, and I was going to bring that to you on the 5th of April. And I'll turn it back to Mayor Harvey, but you can certainly discuss it and move these onto that planning document. But I just wanted to apologize that you haven't seen that before, and you should have. And my fault.
I appreciate that, Dave. There's been a lot coming into the city of Sonoma. You've been drinking from the fire hose, as they say, for a bit here. And so handling it very well, and no apology needed. Appreciate it. And I also, I had kind of mentioned to Dave, let's put this on the agenda setting, and then he got back to me with this document, and I didn't reply in time, and it got on the agenda. So I should have, pushed to make sure it got on the quarterly agenda. All that being said, I think these are really important items for us to contend with. I think there's other pieces for surrounding affordable housing, the creation of housing, and making that more possible, easier to do, cheaper, and more beneficial. I think all of these are really critical. I would really like to do all of these. We could move them forward, or we can talk about it at a quarterly agenda setting. I think if we talk about, I guess we're not so much to get really deep into the item here, right, Jeff? But in 2020, I thought that we'd have starting the developments ad hoc subcommittee with Councilmember Agrimonti at the time, Vice Mayor now, and Planning Commissioner Barnett at the time now on council, and now it's me and Kelso on this ad hoc subcommittee. I thought that last year we would kind of have a year of housing items. We would be bringing forward a lot of changes to our development code, our housing element, and really move forward along a lot of ways that we could adjust that development code in order to develop a better path forward for affordable housing in the city of Sonoma. Of course, the pandemic and the world had other things to say about what we would do with the previous year. And as things are starting to level out, these are really critical issues that I think do need to be brought to the fore. There are a number of locations inside the city of Sonoma that are state or locally owned by governments. I think discussing whether or not we can bring those into the city, use them for affordable housing is a useful conversation, just because land cost is one of the biggest barriers that housing sees. Councilmember Agrimonti had brought to the fore this discussion of the appeal fee, which we see brought up a lot by constituents, especially with regards to the Broadway MacArthur project and the fact that that hasn't been developed into anything. I think also discussion of our inclusionary ordinance, which has been successful in generating housing at that moderate, above moderate level, but not as successful at lower levels. And I think there's also discussions around parking and other things that we could really have. And I've also put in here these ideas of specific plans. We did have this housing action meeting where we brought everybody together, brought the community together, brought a gentleman from Healdsburg out to kind of talk about housing, and then we didn't pick it up too much and run with it. And so I would like to look at some of the results of that housing, our community study, and start applying that to what we have here. So I'm not sure as far as how broad this discussion could be right now. I'm happy to bring this back at the agenda setting session and see if there's agreement, but I just wanted to let people know where I'd like to see us go in the next couple months is really kind of hone in, focus on development code, and focus on changing the way that we do housing here so that it can be more productive, more affordable, and successful.
And Mr. Mayor, I agree with you. I have to say, however, that quarterly, whatever we locked ourselves into, I felt like a wild horse in a corral because nothing else could get on the agenda. So I actually would appreciate having a discussion before we discuss the quarterly agenda by the council. I don't know how that's done, Jeff, with a close, I have no idea how. I know there are 5 ways that you can meet in a closed session, but I just want to know that everybody is comfortable with what's being offered. I'm very supportive Mr. Mayor, of what you're offering, but there are other things that are here in the city that are very important as well. So I don't
So
know.
let me understand correctly. You want a discussion about how do we get items onto the agenda? Is that?
Yes, and I know there's a provision for that to happen, but it was sort of difficult. And so I think I'm sorry, Kelso, I'll speak for you as well. I'm so interested in the cemeteries, and so is Kelso, thank goodness. That's something, an opportunity for us to redo that whole system and hopefully move us out of whatever we're stuck in right now. So that's something that's very important to me. And I'm glad you mentioned parking. I think that's a huge issue that we have never really dealt with.
Yeah. So, okay, I want to make sure, I appreciate that. I want to make sure we stay within the bounds of the Brown Act. As far as discussion, I think it's a good comment as well. And so I can bring these forward to the quarterly agenda setting if that's the desire of council.
I mean, I don't know.
These for just agree that we want to put these on the agenda, and that would be kind of a pre-agreement of the quarterly agenda setting session too. You can consider these my items for the quarterly agenda, and if you agree and desire to talk about these, we can do that, and we can add other things to that one.
And however I'm directed is fine with me. It just, I'm breaking out of the corral.
I like it. I like it. Councilmember Ding?
Oh, I agree. I totally agree that your offer, that is very, very important. I would say the 100% support. But as to the procedure, I like to prefer, and we go the regular procedure, because you just mentioned we have the ad hoc committee, and we can go to the ad hoc committee, do a little bit more technical research, collect the data, and it will strengthen our the approach. That is and also we need to gather more public comments from our community. Remember 2 years ago, and you and Rachel Hundley had affordable housing workshop at that time. That's really, really wonderful. Neighbors gathered together, and the different people, they including and the new, the waiters, waitress, teachers, policemen, everybody come together. Also a developer, and also join with us for that the workshop, so that we can heard more about the public comments for our future action. So definitely I would support it, but we need to take the time, gather more information, and then and go further. We're diversified our public comments, including local teachers, policemen, and very low income families. And also we need to consider donors and developers. They have the interest to build the house, because sooner or later, affordable housing, who will build it? It's not us. We just offer the policy. We still need to provide some favorable and flexible policy to those kind of builders. Attract more builders, developers, come to Sonoma. We work together and build up the housing and also affordable housing in a lot.
I appreciate those comments, Councilmember Ding, and I agree with you. Absolutely, more study needs to be done. The case here, I'm just asking to have that conversation, and I think it's really important that we do that, and I think it's important that we do it carefully with the thoughts of the town and everybody who lives in it, and provide each individual item with lots of opportunity for public comment and research and all the rest of it. So I appreciate those comments and totally agree with them. Go ahead, Councilmember Barnett.
Yeah, I would just like to thank you, Mayor, for bringing these items to the agenda. I think these are all very important. And as you said, I was really excited about 2020 being sort of a year of action on housing to follow up with the Housing Our Community series. And obviously, a pandemic got in the way, but now that hopefully the light is at the end of the tunnel, we can get back and focus on these very important issues. What I would generally say is, I want to discuss all of these issues. But it's important to me that the process unfolds in the right way. And so to the extent that I believe Dave and Vice Mayor Agrimonti talked about an agenda setting item on April 5th, I'm okay with that. I mean, we're sort of talking about it now, but further talk about it on April 5th and figure out exactly how the process is going to unfold. What I would suggest, I think, as Planning Director Storr well knows, we have a housing element that's due in a couple years, and we're about to kick off a housing element, and all these are housing related issues. And if there's a way we can discuss all these issues through the housing element process, perhaps maybe we kick off with a joint Planning Commission City Council meeting. We talk about all these issues together, and then we refer them to the Development Code Subcommittee, which then comes back to the Planning Commission, which then comes to the City Council. As long as the process works, I think that like a good process establishes trust in the process, and I think that's obviously a very important thing when it comes to development in a small town. So that's a long way of saying I'm really excited about these issues, that you brought these forward, and I would love to talk to them. I just want to talk about them in the right way. And I think we should further talk about that at our next meeting, and would suggest perhaps a joint Planning Commission City Council meeting again to kick off this housing element process.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Barnett, and it's no surprise you want to get back to Planning Commission as soon as possible. I'm kidding, but I certainly agree with you. I think it's good if we have a good process. We want to have the Planning Commission is certainly our development code experts, and I think that involving them in this process would be really good. And I would like to respect the proper process of the agenda setting session, and so bringing this forward to agenda setting, I'm hearing general positive from council as far as talking about these issues. It was my desire to really just kind of kickstart them and get this thing moving, because it seems like we're mired in COVID still right now, and I'm trying to dust some of the old ideas off for the new ideas off and bring them forward to get some action happening. So looks like there's support. I'm hearing it, but I'm fine to move this to April 5th, discuss it then, and then over the next few months, bring these back to council and potentially Planning Commission individually, discuss that process as we go through it. That's fine with me. Public comment. Should we go to public comment? Jeff, you've been unmuted for a while. Did you want to say something?
No.
Okay, great, perfect, beautiful. So we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. And let's see who we've got here. Dave Ransom.
Hello again. I'm Dave Ransom. I live in Santa Rosa. I go to church in Sonoma. I'm a member of the Sonoma United Methodist Church and its Spiritual Action Group. Tonight, I'm speaking for the Sonoma Valley Housing Group. We are delighted that Mayor Harvey has brought this list of agenda items to the council, and we hope that every council member will vote to adopt them, whatever the process for doing that, for further discussion. As you probably know, it's been almost 7 years since we made our initial request that the council declare a housing state of emergency and consider a number of solutions, not all of which are on the mayor's suggested agenda. But now is not the time to bring them up. As you can imagine, we will have much more to say when the council actually debates these issues. Now is the time to celebrate Mayor Harvey's initiative in getting affordable housing specifics on the agenda. We look forward to the council doing just that. Thank you. I'm finished.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ransom. Next, we have Fred Albach. Fred?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm a little confused after the discussion here if the council will be voting to advance this item or not. But I have my prepared statement here that and I also want to say that when I saw this agenda item, I wrote all my friends and I said, this is huge. You guys got to show up and talk about this. This is big. And so I think it's really big. And now's my public comment as a member of the Sonoma Valley Housing Group. We at the Sonoma Valley Housing Group have been active in local housing issues since 2013. We're anchored in the 3 Ps of affordable housing: production, preservation, and protection. We hope Mayor Harvey's suggestions can provide the basis for a new beginning for addressing what are clearly, by all reasonable measures, salient and pressing local housing issues. We've had 13 years of crisis here, and I think we're getting past the process stage and time to act. The city's Housing Our Community series has already put strong recommendations on the table, and there are many ideas. We can talk about these ideas in the future. We realize that this agenda item 6.2 is about advancing a slate of housing items for a future agenda. The Sonoma Valley Housing Group supports this proposal by Mayor Harvey wholeheartedly. We will have more to say when hopefully the council unanimously approves this future item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred. Next we have Jim McFadden. Jim, I believe you're on with the Sonoma City Council. There you are. Go ahead and mute yourself and start talking.
Okay. My name is still Jim McFadden, and I am part of the Sonoma Valley Housing Group also. And as I'm sure you know, the Sonoma Valley Housing Group has been advocating for low-income housing and social equity forever, specifically for 7 years now. And we're gratified to be part of the discussion and very happy that Mayor Harvey has seen fit to put this whole slate of items up for possible future council agenda. We look forward to engaging these housing issues in a robust community discussion, and we encourage you to vote to agendize all the items for a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McFadden. And next we have Luke Lindenbush. Luke, you're on with the Sonoma City Council. Oh, and you're off. Get him back into the panelists, and now he's on.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And good evening, Mayor Harvey and Council. My name is Luke Lindenbush, Project and Policy Coordinator with Generation Housing. Generation Housing is a nonprofit advocacy organization working for the affordability, supply, and diversity of homes here in Sonoma County. And we support prioritizing housing, especially affordable housing, in the goals of the Sonoma City Council. So just want to say tonight, thank you very much to Mayor Harvey for prioritizing housing, and we wholeheartedly support moving it forward in the future. We also submitted a letter for your consideration with a lot of overlap in some of the goals that have been identified by the council here, including exploring a specific plan for West Napa Street, looking at government-owned but also commercial property that could be suitable for housing development and is currently vacant or otherwise underutilized. And we also advocate for looking at concepts like missing middle housing and affordable housing overlay zoning. So these are just some of the concepts that we can look at, some of the policies that we can look at to advance fairer housing, to advance more attainable, more affordable housing in the city of Sonoma. So once again, we really appreciate the initiative in getting this put on the agenda tonight, and look forward to discussing this more robustly moving forward. And we'll see you on April 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciate your comments. Do you have anybody else coming up? Seeing no one rise, I'll bring it back to council. Oh, wait, we've got one more. We've got Ken. He did it right at the end. Bring him in. We got two. All right. Go ahead, Ken.
Good morning. Mayor Harvey and council, thank you for the time here. The Sonoma Valley Housing Group, which I am a staunch supporter of, strongly supports advancing all these suggested items to a future council agenda. Please vote yes to bring these items back for a full discussion. Housing, and especially low-income, deed-restricted housing for essential workers, is incredibly important. The general plan says all those who work here should be able to live here. I mean, that's just simple, make sense. We hope these suggestions by Mayor Harvey will make that a reality. I have been working for affordable housing since I got elected to the city council these many years ago, and we are closer than ever to achieving our goal. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. Next we have Deeber Grode. Mr. Burgode, you're on with the Sonoma City Council. Go ahead and mute yourself. We cannot hear you if you're talking right now. You have to hit the unmute button.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. We can hear you.
Thank you. I support the thrust of the agenda item for the proposals listed and others that we would like to propose for the future. To be specific, on inclusionary housing, it's not delivering. It's collecting fees is a token amount of money, and producing a handful of moderate income units is not in any way dealing with the problem. All proposals in the future should be 50% targeted towards an AMI of 50% to 80% of income. If it's good enough for the UGB proposal, it's good enough for the rest of the developers. On the West Napa rezoning, I think that's a great idea. You have a lot of small property owners there, and we want to make sure that these changes are only suitable for affordable housing production and not go through this process just to create more market rate. Reimbursing the housing fund with COVID relief funds. Thank you. You've got that idea already. I think they should be a tax on absentee owners of single family homes for whom it's their second home and they're not a primary resident. Again, I'm pleased to see the council is taking action to review the city's housing policies now. Unfortunately, since we now have a 20-year urban growth boundary lockdown on new sites outside the city limits, which was adopted prior to any council review or any inventory under the housing element of available sites, we don't know if there's any land inside or outside the city to build affordable housing. And this is really backwards. We're just letting de novo produce market rate and taking up everything that's available. So as you might see where I'm getting at, I am basically proposing a moratorium on any market rate housing of more than 4 units that until we know that we've got land available to build affordable housing. This, I think, is the crux of the whole matter in the city of Sonoma. We've overproduced market rate housing for the last 30 years at least. We have sadly underproduced affordable housing over the last 30 years. Unless we place a moratorium on market rate developers offering the top dollar and forcing affordable housing developers to go away, we're just not grappling with the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you much, Mr. Burgode. Seeing no one else rise for comment, I'll give it one last second. We're going to go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the council. So I guess, we're kind of faced with this decision of pushing this decision. If we agree to agendize, I know that I'm jumping the gun here off the quarterly, but it does seem a little foolish to say, if we all agree with these, to say, well, let's wait till April 5th and then agree with them then to put them on the agenda. I mean, that's the choice tonight. I'm fine either way. We can wait till April 5th to say, let's allow staff and direct staff to get these items on the agenda. Or we could just say tonight, yes, we do want to get these items on the agenda and we'd like to direct staff to do that. Go ahead, Councilmember Barnett.
One of my concerns about that is each one of these will take a significant amount of staff time to even get it ready for council. And so I want to talk about every single issue, but I just also want to talk about the process first. Are we doing this with the Planning Commission in the ad hoc? Are we starting with council? I want to talk about the process because, and maybe David Storer can talk about this. I don't know what kind of capacity they have, but to really present like a sort of council level presentation, it's going to take a lot of time, which I'm fine with because these are very important issues, but I think we need to be aware of all that first.
I mean, I think some of them will certainly, and some of them won't, right? If we're talking about a specific plan, yes, going to take a lot of time. That's a huge project to undertake. If we're talking about inclusionary, we're going to be bringing that back just because of that ad hoc subcommittee pretty soon anyway. The affordable housing fees for development are already there. There's other things like, you know, parking restrictions and stuff like that that could be discussed relatively quickly. It's different projects are going to take different varying amounts of time. And obviously I'm not saying that these should all come back in the next month. This is kind of like over the next quarter plus. These are the things I'd like to get moving. And go ahead, David, if you have additional comments.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, the City Council has given direction to staff beginning fall of last year, created the couple of ad hocs. We had the growth management, not the growth management, the UGB ad hoc and the development code ad hoc, and it's been populated by different folks. And from a staff perspective and ad hoc perspective, it was, let's take the pieces of the development code and in concert with the housing element, which we're going to begin, and I'll get to that in a minute. But we've already started the process to amend the development code with an eye towards SB 330. And as we've spoken in the past, SB 330 is all about trying to create production by taking parts of your development code and making it easier to go through that development process, all by way of saying that train has left the station. We're meeting regularly with that group. That group will make recommendations to the Planning Commission, as Kelso mentioned, and then also on to the City Council. Another thing that is near and dear to Vice Mayor Agrimonti is the appeal fee system and that approach. And the Development Code ad hoc is noodling with that. And we're meeting on a weekly basis. So a lot of these things, as you said, Mr. Mayor, are on their way. They'll unravel. And the theory was we were trying to take the lowest hanging fruit first, and then getting into the broader context of the whole development code, because as we know, it is in more need of assistance than the general plan, although that's not to dismiss the general plan, because we have the housing element, which we do have a clock ticking already. And for everybody's information, the public as well, we are in the process of a department and putting out an RFP. In fact, we've already done it, an RFP to engage consultants to do the housing element update. And all of those pieces of the housing element that you mentioned about starting that discussion, perhaps with a joint meeting, will include all of those pieces that we've discussed as a public back in January of 2020, which included enveloping all of that data that we got from the town halls. That concludes my comments, Mr. Mayor.
So it sounds like, I mean, a lot of the stuff, as we know, is in process. So a lot of the kind of individual piecemeal development code stuff is in process. The larger pieces, like looking at a West Napa Street specific plan, is not in process yet, but I think that is, if I remember correctly from those housing discussions, that was where everybody put all their housing, was along West Napa Street. So I think if you look at those, the results of that survey that we did, that Jack mentioned, Councilmember Ding mentioned, and our planning director also mentioned, I think that's the thing that's desired. But I guess the question before us tonight is, do we want to wait till April 5th and talk about this again and talk more about the process? Do we want to just say, yeah, we want to do these things now? I'll leave it up to you.
But I'm more than happy to talk about it now or talk about April 5th. I would just sort of to echo what David Storer just said. The inclusionary housing ordinance, we're doing an ad hoc right now, which will go to planning and then to City Council. We're doing the fees that way. The residential in lieu fees are supposed to come back at some point, right? The housing administrator with our current affordable units, I believe that's in process. The analysis of government owned land, I'm more than happy to talk about. I don't think that would take very long to put together. And as you said, and the one that actually I'm most excited about is a potential just rezoning or specific plan of West Napa Street. Probably would have to come here. I'm more than happy to talk about every single one of them. I just don't know if they all start at the ad hoc or we do a joint planning in City Council. I just want to, the one thing that concerns me is, as Planning Director Storer just said, we're trying to go as quickly as possible with some of these these development code updates because of SB 330 and because we want to get the code updated as quickly as possible before new applications come in. And I don't want them to take their eye off the ball on that because they have to work on some of this other stuff that is just as important, but it's just sort of a timing mechanism. And so
Well, I
Those
mean,
are,
some of it's directly part of that 330 process, right? And I think there's additional things I would talk about, you know, the difference between parking in residential zones versus a multifamily dwelling unit, right? A single family home versus multifamily. I think those are all things that'll come through that ad hoc. But there's also some of these bigger pieces. I don't know. I think we should kickstart either now or soon, especially on things like specific plans, talking about zoning and ways that we use that. So I don't know, up to you guys. I think there's broad agreement that we want to talk about these things. In some ways, we are talking about all these things already kind of below the surface. But just want to know, I'd like to, you know, shift gears a little bit, move a little faster on them, and get these things done. So my desire is just to kind of direct staff that this is a priority for council right now is housing. Because for me,
So then maybe when we come back on the 5th, all those things that Kelso discussed and all those, and what David offered possibly can be reported out on.
yeah, maybe we could have for April 5th, like a work plan on how to accomplish these and through which process, whether it's through the Development Code Subcommittee or if it begins with council or, you know, perhaps we could have something like that.
Just listening to you all, I think that's probably a good path. And that way I could discuss this with the management team a couple of times here tomorrow. We have our meeting tomorrow and then the next Tuesday, and we could present to you something that's reasonable to the staff as well as accomplishes the goals that you want.
I appreciate that, David. I think that's the right way to do it. I want to be respectful of staff time and cognizant of the fact that, like we said in the previous two things with the water presentation and Sue's budget, there's always a lot that's going on under the surface that we don't see and aren't necessarily aware of. And so I want to be respectful of that as well, but I do want to kind of like shift this into a priority place. So I think that's a great suggestion, Councilmember Barnett, and glad you kind of concur with that. Dave, does the rest of council feel like that's a good direction for this?
I'm very comfortable with it.
Okay. Comments from everybody else? Do we need a motion or do you have kind of direction on this?
I think I have direction.
Taking a motion, because this kind of topic continuously in the future we needed to discuss. If any updates from the staff, they can report, and then sometimes we can revisit something in the older code, existing the code, and put in the comments.
Well, I'll make a motion.
Ad hoc, I encourage ad hoc committee, keep on working closely, together and see any issues. So because this is a so important issue, and it's not just like in a slogan, the affordable housing is not just give the numbers, inclusions, 20% or 25%. A lot of the issues, if you put in a 25%, maybe no developer come, and if you put in a 20%, and also no any another developer come, it depends on. It's very, very tricky. Of course, I'm very, emotional. I want to see it will happen the next day. Not really. We needed to, to see everywhere, every the moving parts and put together in the long. Yeah,
we've got to do this in consult with developers. We got to know what's realistic and what's possible,
yes,
and do it in a way that will actually generate what we want to see, and trim back some of our expectations to make sure that it's in concert with reality. Totally
that
agree.
is right. Here I can share you a short story. One developer, a very small developer, and he purchased a piece of land on a Broadway, 6 units. He is kind of happy, donate, or actually isn't donate, classify the 2 of them as affordable housing. But right now, he told me he wants to hold this project because whole processing is so struggling for him and for his architect. Architect told him, and during the past 40 years experience, this project is the most challenging project for him. So that basically is not only in the numbers and 20% affordable housing. He told me, oh, I'm very happy to, use it. Right now it's 30%, right? 33%. for the affordable housing. He said, I would like to share, but even like this way, it's hard for him to build this house. It's a lot of the issues. You know, also I tell him, I said, I want to share your story with our colleague. I said, I will not mention your name. He said, Jack, go ahead, using my name. That is, everything is true. So the affordable housing, we have a lot of the issues we need to discuss. Yeah.
We need a comprehensive approach.
Yes.
Councilmember Barnett.
Yeah, I just want to wrap my final comments on this. I just want to thank you again, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this to the agenda. And if the ultimate goal is to make an impression upon staff that 2021 is going to be the year of housing, I think you've done so. And I think they've heard it loud and clear. And whatever process that unfolds, I'm really excited to participate in figuring that out. But these issues have been sort of kicked down the road for a while, and it's now time to focus on housing issues and cemetery issues. But we'll talk about that at the agenda setting on April 5th.
Good.
Right, Vice Mayor Agrimonti?
No, I agree with that. You know, we're not going to get anywhere if we keep fighting appeals. I don't care if you make affordable housing at 35%. If a $400 appeal comes in, we're going to be stopped in our tracks. So some of these things have to be figured out before we get to the big banana. Is that a real thing?
It sure is now.
I agree.
I don't know. What the heck did I just say?
We don't-
Slap me.
Well, so I think, I guess Jack asked for a motion, so I would just move that we do have staff bring to us a kind of a work plan or some sort of a process to address these items and kind of build through affordable housing. And I would love to declare officially the 2020 the year of affordable housing, but maybe that's not part of the motion. I just think I would move that we do bring back that work plan and kind of figure out a process that's sensible but rapid to address these issues.
And that you're at
Yes.
just for Sonoma.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
Second. Oh, so,
Second?
You
We'll
can
give
take-
it to the
no,
vice mayor.
I'll yield to you, Kelso.
Oh, yielded to Kelso. All right.
To the gentleman from Sonoma, I will yield to you.
Okay.
All right.
Also-
Wonderful. The roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes. And
Thank you. The motion carries 0-1.
Thank you. And I really want to thank council and staff for a robust and congenial discussion. It was just really, really nice. That was good. I enjoyed that, and I look forward to continuing that in the future. And glad to hear everybody weigh in on such an important issue. And thank you to staff and the public for their comments as well. Moving on to item 6.3, discussion, consideration, possible action regarding the mayor's assignments to various boards and committees. Now that the council vacancy has been filled by young Kelso. So we'll go ahead
Ew.
and get this going. So we have a couple of vacancies here. I think really we have one, right?
There were also some, Mayor Harvey, that you put yourself into that were waiting, but you were like, well, I'll just go in that till we discuss it again.
Great.
With the new. Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
So
Let
that's
me look.
I'm required to be on that one. I know Kelso's going to be on Citizens Advisory Committee.
That's all right.
That was the.
Congratulations. That's great. Great place.
I believe it is I want to say the Economic Vitality Partnership was one, and the Route 37 Policy Committee.
No, Madeline's doing the Route 37 Policy Committee.
No, you're the alternate though. It was you being the alternate. We assigned you as the alternate for a couple of these that you were saying, well, we'll come back and visit when we have the new council member appointed. I believe those were the two, but I would have to go back and listen again, honestly, Mayor Harvey, to tell you exactly.
Sure. I might stay on Route 37. Do you want to do Kelso, do you want to back up Jack on the Water Advisory Committee as his alternate? Okay. And you could back me up on the ABAG General April meeting. It's just one meeting a year.
More than happy to.
Okay. And then we do need to officially appoint Kelso to the Housing Ad Hoc Subcommittee and remove the brutal takeover,
I
removing.
love that. What are you talking about the development code?
Yes.
All right.
You've been-
Thank you, Kelso. God bless you and your family.
And I think we
And
should
your people.
we should formally put Councilmember Barnett on the cemetery ad hoc as well.
Oh, I would love to be on that.
Oh, that's great.
With Matt.
I would love to help Madeline with that, yes, or Vice Mayor Agrimonti, yeah.
Yes. Well, as I said before, I really look forward to you guys giving the cemetery issue new life.
We're gonna finally lay it to rest, right?
My head is stone now after that one.
We're having too much fun. I don't know about this. Is government really getting done here? Absolutely.
I don't know if this is appropriate to bring up now, but I know at some point before the new council member was selected, there was discussion about the new council members' appointments to like the planning commission, and there was some debate over whether or not that new council member had the ability to select, or is it former councilwoman Hundley's selections? Is that, can we talk about that in this item, or are we?
I think that's outside the item.
But just as a clarification, if I may, Mayor Harvey, we are going to be bringing back that policy for review we have to clarify that exact item. And we do have that scheduled for I believe it was on the 5th and it was moved to the 19th, but we can clarify whether that is the case or not.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Are there any other assignments that need to be filled?
I think that's it. And just to clarify, Mayor Harvey, if I may, what were the changes that were made? Make sure I capture.
Kelso will be my alternate on number 18. Kelso will be the alternate on number 17, the Water Advisory Committee.
Housing Ad Hoc, replacing Vice Mayor Agrimonti, or no, Vice Mayor or previous council member. And then the Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission.
Yeah.
And the
cemetery.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I really appreciate staying on 37. And now that I'm back on North Bay Watershed Association, I think it's really important because those two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If your work on other committees is any harbinger of the future, I assume they'll be turning Route 37 to come right into Sonoma.
Thank you for using
Anybody
that
can
word.
make that road turn. It's you. So
I'm looking forward to turning it all into a bucolic scenery.
I love it. I love it.
Mr. Mayor, would you entertain a motion to ratify your appointments?
I would entertain it. Does somebody want to make that motion? Okay, I'll make the motion. I've got to be the only mayor that makes this many motions. I'll move that. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Dean,
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
Wonderbar.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Item 6.4, discussion, consideration, and possible action, adopting of an ordinance, adding chapter 2.03 and title 2 to the Sonoma Municipal Code relating to electronic and paperless filing of campaign disclosure statements and statements of economic interest. City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. In the staff report that was presented as part of the packet, I'll preface this with there was a lot of information thrown at you in detail. regarding the different governing acts and government codes that govern the action that we're asking the council to consider this evening. The first one being the Political Reform Act. As you're all aware, that act requires that specified disclosure statements such as the Form 60 and Form 70 be filed. And under the act, it also requires that these filings be made online or electronically with your local filing official, which just happens to be me, your city clerk. So also with the enactment of recent legislation, my office is now required to have in these filings posted in a way that's the most transparent and accessible within 72 hours of the filing deadline. And currently the process is council candidates and campaign committees, they file these copies in paper with me. And at this time, we spend a great deal of time reviewing them. I do, reviewing them for accuracy and making sure that all of the statements have been completed that are required. And in order to put those online, there's additional work in the fact that we have to go through, make all of the redactions, rescan them, and then post them. And as you can imagine, with an office of 1.5 individuals, especially working remotely, that can be difficult to make that connection that quickly. And not saying that this type of transparency isn't important, it's critical to the political processes in the city, and it's also mandated, and it requires staff resources to manage it. As a means to be more cost effective and to maintain that, we recently contracted with a company called NetFile to allow for online submission and posting of both our campaign disclosure forms, those 460s, but also our conflict of interest statements that you've all had the pleasure of filing on more than one occasion. The program's been installed and is operational, but there's one last authorization necessary to make by the council to make these filings fully electronic. So in order to do that, per government code, the council must officially adopt an ordinance memorializing your approval to require and authorize a complete electronic signature and submission of electronic campaign disclosure forms. Tonight's the first action in a two-step process to implement this filing, this electronic filing. So the purpose of the proposed ordinance is twofold. To require online filing of campaign statements, and also to require online reporting of contributions and independent expenditures with electronic signatures related to elections of campaigns for city council, and also by your ballot measure committees. And I will share with you this year with 4 measures on the ballot. There were several for and against committees that was a lot of statements to file and respond to and make sure that everything was accurate. This ordinance, by implementing this ordinance, it ensures that the filings are going to be available immediately. And it'll be in a manner that is electronically, it'll be not difficult for the filer. That's part of the requirement. And by doing this, it'll ensure that those filings are filed within the 72 hours that will keep us in compliance with that new legislation. It also pertains specifically to only the campaign finance portion of the NetFile system, and will only apply to those filers that meet the thresholds as established by the Political Reform Act based on what type of committee they are. It also should be noted that the NetFile system is able to accommodate the online filing of several different types of required forms, including the 460, the 470, the 496, and 497, which are the most commonly used ones here in the city of Sonoma in our local election campaigns. The system is created specifically for cities and counties. It meets all of the requirements of the Secretary of State, It utilizes industry best practices for securing all the data and allows for electronic and paper filing of campaign statements. All of the electronic filings are retained in compliance with the city's records retention schedule, and NetFile also maintains each filing for easy updates the next year. So if the filer is using these, or if they are a semi-annual file or it's a campaign statement, it maintains all of the filings so you can go in and easily update what you've already done. It also checks your math for you and puts when you input it on the cover pages, it puts it towards the correct statement, the correct page in the statement. As far as statement of economic interest, you'll notice that that is something that is not required by ordinance. There's not a requirement for an ordinance to be in place for us to do those electronically. And we have begun receiving those electronically. This round, we started with that. And the individuals who have used it have said that it's very easy to use. One of the things that I really liked was there was a question on a filer statement from the FPPC today. And I knew that they had filed it. I was immediately able to check the system, download it, and send it right back to FPPC. Literally took 5 minutes. And so that was all said and done, avoiding a fine for the filer. That being said, this ordinance does not pertain again to those statements. However, in speaking with the city attorney's office and staff, it was felt that this was an internal process that we would like council to authorize us to require those to be filed electronically as well. Again, that's one of those things that maintaining them as a 1.5 person office, we receive Form 700s for all the city council, city attorney, city manager, planning commission, multiple other commissions and committees, and all city staff, as well as consultants, outside consultants. When we review those, a lot of times they require amendments or there are pages missing. And the system has built-in safeguards so that if you've marked something on your form, it will automatically tell you, wait, you didn't file this page, come back and do an amendment. You need to add it before it requires an amendment. So that was a request as an internal process that the council would recognize and authorize that filing to be electronically as well. It should be noted that in Sonoma County, 4 of the 9 counties have already passed this ordinance or a similar ordinance, and 1 is currently in the process. The other 2, at this time, they didn't plan to do so, and the 3rd was in process of talking to see if they were going to be feasible for them. And the staff and the report and the draft ordinance that are being presented were both a joint effort with the city's attorney's office. And that concludes staff's report, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
I was totally in support, this electronic file. And I should do it a long time ago. But right now, I want to do it right now, because it's an accuracy and also an efficiency. And also it's in a trend. Sooner or later, everything is paperless. Could you please send us a link or set up an account? Again, we can start from the fresh run.
Yeah, I can resend you for the Form 700s, and you came in a little late on that.
Okay.
Councilmember Dean, but I can send you the welcome letter for sure again.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Of course.
We'll talk, okay? I think it's great. I can't remember my password. I used one. My God, I don't know. But I know I'll be fine. And because I think just to remind everyone, if you serve on different committees, you need to put them, encapsulate them onto one form. So that's something a little bit different. So I don't know if that's possible to do electronically or just part of that.
I believe you can. Well, I know you can add them to your one statement, Vice Mayor Agrimonti. I've seen it done with staff members. What we'll do is if the other agency uses NetFile, then if they already use NetFile, then you can, but you can't. It won't automatically send it to those other agencies. I know a staff member filed for the Risk Management Authority as a board member and her staff position, and just printed it and sent it.
So that's,
but it would say,
so obviously that complicates things.
Could you just print and send?
It's actually just, yeah, we just print it and send it. It's actually a little easier, again, for me, because I typically I go through and send you the form of what you need to do, leaving off that. So all of that would be automated, and in there for the next time when you went in, it would just say, do you want to file for this again? That type of stuff.
Okay, thanks.
So we can.
Thank you.
Comments from Councilmember Barnett, are you all right?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Great. No questions from me. Do we have anybody wishing to make public comment? Seeing that most of our members of the public are members of staff in some capacity.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing no one. So we'll go ahead and bring it back to council. And I'd just like to say, Rebecca, I really appreciate your work on this. I think, over the last couple of years that I've been on council, you've worked really hard to kind of bring us into the 21st century, and you continue to do that. And so I just really appreciate your work with regards to that. The government has finally discovered the internet and computers. And so it's really, really great to see this kind of continued progress in this direction. So just appreciate your work to find this and to bring it to the fore. Do we have, are we okay?
I put to the motion for approve.
All right.
Thank you to Rebecca.
I'll second that.
All right. Roll call vote.
Well, thank you all. Vice Mayor Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnett.
Aye.
Councilmember Ding.
Aye.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0-1.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your work on this, Rebecca. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
All right. And I've heard, I'm going to go ahead and let our city manager, Dave Kiff, go first because he's got some reports. So let's do it. Oh, he's got a PowerPoint.
Ah.
Wow.
Hopefully my screen is being shared. Is that working?
It is indeed.
Okay. And I'm gonna move the slides. Hopefully the slide will move too, and then I'll stop asking him. Did the slide just move? No. Hang on. How about now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, I'm gonna cover COVID-19 and the city manager's recruitment update. I'll be fast. So this is what our data looks like right now. This is a table I share with the council regularly. The great news here for March 15th today is that we're down now in the county at 2.5% test positivity. We have not been that low since the beginning of the pandemic. So that means that a lot of people are getting tested and there's a lot of negative tests. So that actually puts us into the bottom of the orange tier. We do expect even in the county's Healthy Places Index census tracts that will be in the orange tier. And then the other good news this morning, our caseload per 100,000 as adjusted is now genuinely in the red tier, even without that bump that the governor made a couple of weeks ago involving vaccination. So, and our numbers in Sonoma and our zip code are now the lowest I've ever seen them, and certainly not as low as they've been, as I understand it, since July. So really good things going on in terms of COVID. Finally, we're in the red tier. There's Sonoma County painted red. Isn't that pretty? It'd be prettier if it was orange, but we're sure glad we're out of the purple. Red tier means K through 12 schools can all open. And Sonoma Valley Unified has a plan for that. We don't have to stop now just at elementary school. Restaurants can open indoors, 25% capacity. Gyms and fitness can open indoors, 10%. wineries and breweries can open if no meals served, just outdoors, which was a new thing announced by the governor on the 13th. I'm going to go over vaccines quickly. Eligible now, everybody that's in the healthcare personnel, and then all of phase 1B tier 1, people 65 and over. Just today, people 16 to 64 would have certain health conditions. Persons in childcare and education, food production, emergency services, and grocery and restaurant. Those are all open in Sonoma County. Finding a vaccine, an appointment is more challenging. So 185,000 doses administered in the county as of the 13th, just 2 days ago. You can see really great progression in this chart up until about 2 weeks ago, and that's when it started to flatten out, and that's because the state has diverted a lot of the vaccines to those healthy places index census tract. So not a bad story, but that's why Sonoma County has not increased its vaccinations. They've been doing second doses, but not a lot of new first doses. Where in Sonoma can you get a vaccine? You can get an appointment at CVS or Safeway. Veterans Memorial, that clinic, it remains operating by the Sonoma Valley Community Health Center. Our next high school clinic is the end of this month. It's only for people that are getting their second dose of Moderna, though. And just as a reminder of what the Sonoma Valley Health Partners have done in a little bit of a month, that includes the city, the fire district, the health center, and the hospital and the school district. Over 3,600 Valley residents have been vaccinated. These are particularly our most vulnerable. These are our 70s and over, farm workers, and others. And the health clinic, health center itself has done over 1,600 in its own operation. So pretty terrific news there. Just a testing reminder. We need to keep testing. It helps you find asymptomatic spread. This is what the mayor mentioned 2 weeks ago. Contact tracing is now easier and it's more effective because there are less cases, so we can figure out who someone who's been exposed to. And most importantly, arguably most importantly, it helps us move into the orange and red tiers. If we test more, we advance more quickly. We get more of a bonus in our numbers if we test more. And just as an example, if you're testing only 200 people and 50 of them are sick, your test positivity is off the charts. If you're testing 2,000 people, some of those are asymptomatic or just a lot of negatives, your test positivity is much lower. Just a reminder, it's a lot easier now. They don't jam the swab way in the back of your cranium. It's just a light nose swab. It's free. There's lots of appointments available. It helps us track the virus. To get a COVID test in the Sonoma Valley, St. Leo's has 2 days, Mondays and Wednesdays, and the Hannah Boys Center has 2 days this week specifically and may continue. They're all day, Friday and Saturday at the Hannah Boys Center. So don't let up. We got to keep wearing our masks when we're outdoors. We got to keep following our social distancing, keep hand washing, get tested, make it part of your schedule, and then hang in there a bit longer, but a lot of progress being made. I'm going to touch briefly on the city manager's recruitment next. The community survey closed last Thursday. About 56 folks from the city and the valley responded. We'll put those results on the city's website. And then the application period closed Friday, just last Friday. 32 applicants ended up applying. And the next steps, the last week of March here, your council will meet in closed session with the recruiter to review the applicants and the applications. And then the following week or the week after that, depending on your own schedule, you could have 5 to 7 applicants available for first interviews. That's my report. Does anyone have any questions about it? Happy to answer them.
No questions from me. Questions from council?
None from me. This is excellent, clear, and easy to look at.
And some nice like paint swatch effects there. I thought, you got some style onto that one.
I got some PowerPoint game going on. Thank you.
Yeah. You were showing some You used every bit of the style options there for that one, so I respect
Every last one.
every last one. Well, no big animation effects, but solid.
True.
Solid. We'll get there. I really appreciate the report. Of course, we want to continue moving through the tiers, get into the orange, get into the yellow. One day we'll all hopefully meet in person this year. We'd love to see that happen, maybe July. But it's super important to continue to get tested. I got tested last week. I'll probably get tested again. It is like our city manager said, just lightly up the nose. Sometimes you even get to choose how deep it goes. So really good, really easy, totally free, highly recommended. Get tested. You sleep better at night. So I like to say, get tested, feel well rested. So just get out there and make sure that we continue that up. We're into red tier. It's a wonderful thing. Restaurants, wineries are reopening, but we got to continue wearing masks, social distancing, and trying to keep our case count as low as possible. It saves lives, saves our economy. So important to do. And I really appreciate the report, David. And excited about the city manager recruitment, but sad because it does remind us of the ticking clock that you have. And if you were an applicant, you'd be my first selection. But unfortunately, you can't be. We are where we are. But you're doing a fantastic job, and everybody really appreciates your work, Dave. I want you to know
And
that.
Sue and Dave, thank you again for the report.
Yeah.
It was, as I said, I think I'm more comfortable reading all the narrative rather than looking at all the numbers, but they all help to work together. So thank you. I really appreciated it.
Great.
Also, I want to say thank you to Logan. Yeah, you the hosted the meeting every time so nicely. A lot of the good comments from community. Thank you. And also thank you for the Dave and Jeff and David and also Rebecca. I want to say thank you because a lot of the details, a lot of the emails, and also right now you used to have assistant, but right now during pandemic, you don't have assistant. Also, you have the surgery, the additional work. Yeah, that is really, really appreciated. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Other comments from council? We got city council member reports or comments. So any things that happened in your relative meetings? We got Council Barnett. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to briefly mention, and I'm sure the council would join me to wish Sonoma a very happy St. Patrick's Day on Wednesday.
Yay!
We're in the red tier now, and maybe on Wednesday we'll call it the green tier. But I just want everyone to celebrate safely. And if you decide to go down to Murphy's Irish Pub,
I'll be there.
Which was founded by a former mayor and councilman, I would just encourage everyone to celebrate, but celebrate safely. And happy.
Great.
Well, I guess that's good night.
Yeah. Oh, unless Jeff Walter, attorney at law, has anything to add.
Jeff Walter, attorney at law, does not have anything to add tonight.
All right. Thank you so much. We will declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Good night.